Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Miranda walked home excitedly. Today, she had to tell her parents that she wanted to marry a young man. The 19-year-old girl knew that her choice would not please her father and mother, as they wanted to see a wealthy spouse near their daughter. But Sebastian was not such a man. Miranda met Sebastian 6 months ago. She was walking along the seafront with a friend when two guys approached them. The young men offered to spend leisure time together. That evening, Miranda immediately refused. But here Buddy Kelly wanted to communicate with the guys, and eventually the acquaintance took place. Young people walked together for a long time. While telling funny stories from life, Miranda immediately liked one of the guys, whose name was Sebastian. The girl also noticed that she also sympathized with him. She saw the young man addressing her most often. After a while, Miranda looked at her watch and told the company that it was time for her to go home. The guys sighed sadly and tried to convince the girl that they could stay a little longer. However, Miranda was adamant and told her new friends and her friend, "I don't want to upset my parents. If I told them I would be there no later than 22 o'clock, I have to keep my word. But you can call your mom and explain the situation. Just say you want to hang out with cute guys for a while," Sebastian said with a smile at the same moment. Miranda looked at the guy, who was waiting for a response from her. The girl wouldn't mind doing it herself, but she didn't want to hear various questions about her new acquaintances from her parents later at home. So she spoke with a shift in her voice. "I will not change my decision. I'm going home, and you can continue chatting with Kelly. And I can also say that we can go for a walk the next day, but we just need to agree on a time." "That's not a bad idea," Sebastian exclaimed. "Then I'll walk you home, and my friend will walk your friend home." All agreed to this proposal, and then the young men split into pairs. Sebastian went to see Miranda off. On the way, he asked the girl about her hobby life, how she plans to arrange her fate in the future. Miranda told that she is the only daughter of her parents. Her father is engaged in entrepreneurship, and her mother works as an accountant in a bank. The girl also said that she is studying to be an economist and wants to follow her mom's footsteps. And at the end of her story, she added that she dreams to marry a good man with whom she will live all her life. Soon the couple approached the girl's house. They stopped near the entrance and were about to say goodbye, as she said with surprise that she told everything about herself, but she herself knows nothing about the new acquaintance. Sebastian smiled back and said, "You'll find out about me, but not today. We'll have an excuse to meet tomorrow and go out again. That's where I'll tell you all about me. By the way, I'll just ask you to leave your phone number. There may be a force majeure and I won't be able to make the meeting. In that case, I'll call you and warn you." The couple exchanged phone numbers, and the girl ran home. All that evening, she thought about her new acquaintance and mentally imagined how they would meet again tomorrow. Miranda also wondered what kind of person Sebastian was. At first glance, the young man seemed like a decent guy. However, she had already heard of such suave and nice guys who were rarely with us scoundrels, and slugga in her thoughts, and did not notice how the clock struck 0 o'clock, and Lisa's mother came to see her, who asked why her daughter was still awake. The girl immediately replied, "Mom, go lie down, and I'm going to lie down now. Good night." The next day came. Miranda had expected a call from her new acquaintance, but the phone was silent. The girl thought sadly that the guy had not kept his word. It means that we should not expect anything good from him, because he did not fulfill his promises. In the evening of the same day, Miranda was getting ready for bed when the phone rang. She looked at the number and noticed with delight that it was Sebastian. The girl picked up the phone and, holding back the happy notes, she said, "I hear you're angry. I can hear it in your voice, no offense. But I didn't have a chance. I came from work. I thought I would lie down for an hour, and then I'll call you. But I was tired and fell asleep. When I woke up, I called you right away. Let's reschedule our meeting for tomorrow. It's my day off. How would you like that? It's a deal. I hope that tomorrow you will not sleep all day like a bear in winter." With a smile, the interlocutor spoke back. The next day, the young people met. They wandered through the streets and talked about different topics. And at one point, the girl turned to the guy, saying that he promised to tell her about himself. And so far, he hadn't done so. Sebastian smiled and asked, "What exactly would you like to know?" "I've told you everything about myself. I am waiting for it from you." The guy in response suggested the girl to go to a cozy cafe. As soon as the couple sat down at the table, and Sebastian ordered 2 coffees and a couple of pieces of cake, only then began to talk. The young man told that he came from the village. He has a mother and a younger brother. His father abandoned the family a few years ago. And also the guy said that he is 24 years old and he works at the construction site as a laborer. In the city, he rents one room with a buddy. The girl listened attentively to the new acquaintance, and when he stopped talking, she asked how much the guy plans to live this way. Sebastian looked at the interlocutor in surprise and asked how in such a way. "Well, you will eventually fall in love and want to start a family. Will you take your wife to a rented room where your buddy also lives?" "Of course not. We'll have to live for that moment. Now, let's drink our coffee. It's getting cold. While I was telling you about me." After that date, Miranda began to see her boyfriend often. The girl realized more and more every day that she was attracted to this guy. She often thought about what would happen to their relationship in the future and worried that they might break up. The young people had been dating for 2 months. The girl's mother noticed that her daughter had changed recently. The woman tried to find out from Miranda what was going on with her. However, Miranda guffawed and said that spring brings her thoughts, and that is why she is often in prostration. Lisa was not satisfied with her daughter's answers, and the woman sternly said to the girl, "You're always making jokes and don't realize that your father and I are worried about you." "Mom, I promise that in the very near future, I'll tell you and Dad everything. Don't worry about it, but I'm actually doing really well." Miranda. She told her lover about this conversation. Sebastian calmly listened to the girl, then hugged her and quietly in her ear made her a marriage proposal. And Miranda, hearing these words, immediately enthusiastically responded with consent. After the proposal of the guy, the girl thought about the fact that now it is necessary to introduce the chosen one to her parents. She realized that Sebastian for her mom and dad will not be the best candidate for a spouse. And now the girl went home to warn her parents that she was going to get married. Soon Miranda was sitting in the hall and told her mother and father about meeting her lover. The girl did not hide from her relatives who the young man worked and that he was from the village. Miranda's mother, hearing the words of her daughter, was outraged and said, "Your boyfriend probably won't be able to string 2 words together in a conversation. Are you going to marry him? Come to your senses and don't embarrass your father and me." "Mom, is social status all you care about? What about feeling? I love this man. You imagined it. It's not love. A couple of months will pass, and then you will regret that you wanted to tie your life with this guy." The head of the family intervened in the dialogue between mother and daughter. The man turned to his wife Kelly. "Why did you immediately hawk our girl? Let's get acquainted with this young man initially, and then we will already draw conclusions." Miranda looked gratefully at her father, who stood up for her. And then the girl ran to her room to notify her favorite person that an acquaintance was about to take place. Sebastian listened to the chosen one and promised her that the meeting would be on the heights. Soon enough, the acquaintance took place. Miranda was very worried when she brought the guy to her, but her anxiety turned out to be in vain. Parents liked the young man, especially the girl's father. However, although Lisa approved of her daughter's choice, but after Sebastian left, she said to her husband, "I don't know about you, but it seemed to me that this guy wanted to settle down in life more than to start a family." "Why would you say that? I can't hide the fact that I don't like Sebastian working as a laborer, but it's fixable. As soon as we get married, I'm gonna take him in, and I'm teaching him the ins and outs of entrepreneurship." "I don't know, honey. Why would I think that? Maybe it's just a woman's intuition." "Okay, You and I have already authorized the marriage. Now we have to get ready for the big day ahead of us." Soon the young people applied to the registry office and then began preparations for the wedding. All expenses for the wedding fell on the shoulders of Miranda's parents, as Sebastian's mother received a small salary and could not help financially, and the groom himself had no savings. Sometime later, the wedding took place. Miranda's parents gave the newlyweds the keys to a 2-room apartment. True, not in the center of the city. Sebastian and his wife were happy that they would start their family life not in a rented apartment, but in their own home. A couple of months later, Miranda's father put his son-in-law to work for him. Sebastian plunged headlong into his new responsibilities. The young man was interested in learning the skills of running his own business. Sebastian hoped that in the future his father-in-law would give him his own business, and he informed his wife about it. Miranda smiled at her husband and said, "My dad has already hinted to me that as soon as you and I give them a grandchild, he will sign over his business to you. So what we will slowly start practicing, conceive a child from this day onwards, with increased zeal. I don't want to rush into it as I want to graduate first and then become a mom. In the meantime, I'm gonna be on birth control. You're a strange wife. All women get married and want to be moms, but you want to get an education. I'd rather be weird, but I'd rather be loved by you. I hope so." Sebastian squinted his eyes and looked at her husband slyly. Sebastian laughed and nodded in agreement, and then began to shower the young woman's face with tender kisses. Several years passed. Miranda graduated from the institute and got a job at her mother's bank. The young woman wanted to live with her husband for another year for herself, and then they would think about children. And Miranda said to her husband, "Let's wait with the child for another year, so that I can gain experience at work." "I don't agree with that. I made concessions to you when you wanted to get an education. Now, why don't you respect your husband? I'm sick of being your father's boss. I want to be my own boss so I don't have to listen to your daddy's instructions." "All right. I'm not gonna cross you. I'm gonna stop taking birth control. I'll see what happens." A few months after that conversation, Miranda found out she was pregnant. She realized this because she was constantly embarrassed, and the young woman felt weak. Miranda went to the antenatal clinic, where the doctor congratulated her on the fact that soon she will become a mommy. Miranda immediately informed her husband about it, who enthusiastically accepted the news, and after the first emotions of soon becoming a father, asked her husband if she had told her parents. The girl responded to her husband's words, "Are you the first to know about it? The parents should come the other day. That's when we will tell." Soon Kelly and her husband already knew about the pregnancy of their daughter. The parents of the girl were unspeakably happy that they will soon become grandparents. Miranda's father, as he learned the news, then told his son-in-law that, as promised, he would soon rewrite his business to him. Time was running out. The first 3 places of pregnancy Miranda went well, but the second 3 places there were complications. The young woman spent almost the entire time in the hospital. Miranda was very worried about the baby's condition and prayed to the Almighty that the child would be born healthy. Miranda was born before the due date. The young woman had to stay in the hospital for some more time after the birth in order for her daughter to gain weight. Miranda was okay with how much time she had to spend in the hospital bed just for the baby girl to get stronger. Soon the young woman was discharged from the maternity hospital, and she came home. The spouse prepared for this event. Sebastian equipped the second room as a nursery. While Miranda was in the hospital, the girl was happy that the chosen one was so responsible for the birth of a daughter, who was named Cindy. A month passed, as the young couple had a daughter, Miranda, with pleasure immersed in the role of mom. The young woman tried to manage everything. While her husband was at work, she was engaged in household chores when the daughter was sleeping, and when the baby awake, all the attention was given to her. At the same time, she did not forget about her husband, and another month flew by, and her husband came from work in a bad mood. And Clara immediately noticed it and wondered what happened. Sebastian gloomily looked at the chosen one and softly said that her father for some reason does not fulfill the promise. The young woman looked perplexed at her husband and asked what he meant, and immediately heard the answer, "Your father promised to give me the business, and still does not say anything. I asked him about it, and he said we should be patient. Why should I wait for anything? He made a promise he doesn't keep, and that's not what real men do. But wait a minute to criticize my father. Maybe something happened if he asked you to wait. Go ahead and defend your daddy." The man said angrily, "Don't be angry. I'll talk to my father and find out everything." The next day, the girl called her father and asked him to come when her husband was away. The father was surprised by his daughter's request, but fulfilled Miranda's wish, and soon a conversation took place between David and his daughter. As soon as Miranda saw her father, she asked him why you don't keep your word that Sebastian gave you. "We're going through a business crisis, and if I give the reins to Sebastian, everything will collapse. I've explained this to him many times and told him to wait a year until things get better. But I understand that Sebastian has decided to go through you. I didn't expect that from him. My husband's understandable too. He's been given his word, and he wants his father-in-law to keep his promise. I said I would. Now, as compensation, I can offer you ownership of my Sebastian automobile. In principle, I'll talk to my son-in-law about that myself. But how will you be without a car? We'll figure it out. The main thing, you do not worry," David said softly in response. After a while, Sebastian already drove a foreign car, which was given to him by his father-in-law. Miranda was glad that her father had found a way out of the situation and did not quarrel with Sebastian about the business. The young woman wanted there to be no misunderstandings between her husband and her parents. Years flew, and Cindy turned 3 years old. Miranda immediately gave her daughter to a kindergarten so that the girl could learn to communicate with her peers. During this time, David never gave the business to his son-in-law. Miranda often had disagreements with her husband about this, and when there was another conversation on this topic, the young woman exclaimed in her heart, "I have the feeling that you married me just to become the owner of your own business. Don't be absurd. I just don't like it when words are thrown to the wind." Sebastian said sternly, "But wait, I'm not the one who promised you this. What about my father? And you're the one who's always harassing me. Take me, and like a man, talk to him about it." "I have, and repeatedly. Your father has only one answer, that it's not time yet." A few more years flew by. Cindy started first grade. Sebastian also worked under David. Miranda worked at the bank where her mother worked. The young woman dreamed of climbing the lending institution career ladder, but she did not succeed because her daughter was often sick with colds and therefore take a sick leave always had to Miranda. Her husband flatly refused to sit with her daughter when not to say hello. And once again, when Cindy caught a cold and Miranda again took sick leave, she sat with her daughter at home and played cards, waiting for her husband from work. When her spouse was gone for an extended period of time, Miranda called her chosen one. He answered that he had an emergency at work, and he would come home late. The girl asked what happened on the life partner, did not answer, and hung up. The same thing was repeated the next day. Miranda was in the dark about what was happening at her husband's work. She decided to find out from her father. She called her dad. The young woman called her dad and inquired about the emergency at work. To Miranda's surprise, Miranda's father said, "We are doing fine so far." "What's wrong?" The daughter told David what her husband had told her and about his delays at work. And the father, hearing Miranda's words, was surprised and said that Sebastian was leaving after working hours, just like him. When the girl found out about it, she was furious because her husband deceived her. Miranda waited for her husband after talking to her father, and as soon as he appeared, angrily asked him to explain his delays at work. Sebastian began to talk about the emergency. His wife interrupted him and said that she had recently talked to her father. Sebastian frowned. After that, and with irritation, I said, "Do I have to report to you? I can have my own personal space to use as I please. Do you have a family? Maybe you have a mistress. You're talking nonsense again. Let's go to bed. I'm not going to sleep. I had dinner at the cafe. Who were you at the cafe with? Miranda and her friends. With irritation muttered the spouse. Why don't you invite those friends to visit us? Are you even a smart woman or not? You haven't forgotten that our daughter is sick. Everyone ended the conversation. After this conversation, Sebastian started coming home on time. However, the man became estranged from his spouse. Miranda realized that there was a rift in the family. She tried to talk to her husband, but Sebastian said that he did not want to talk about it. The woman was in despair and turned to her mother, telling her about the situation in the family. Lisa calmed her daughter and promised that she would talk to her son-in-law on the subject. However, the woman did not talk to Sebastian herself and asked her husband to do so. David, hearing his wife's request, furrowed his brow and softly said, I have spoken to Sebastian on this subject, and I can tell you that he sleeps and sees how to become a boss in the firm. And I can't do that because Sebastian makes mistakes in leadership. Do you realize how that could turn out? But you finally gave him your word to give up the firm. If Sebastian goes bankrupt, it will be on his conscience. And now, I'm not sure about him yet. Let's wait a little longer, David said tiredly. A few more years passed. Cindy was already in 6th grade, and at that time, Miranda found out that her husband had a mistress. It happened by accident. The husband came home from work, and as usual went to the bathroom, and left his cell phone in the hallway. When Sebastian was taking a shower, the cell phone rang. Miranda decided to answer it, and picked up the cell phone, which displayed a number signed Sunshine. The woman pressed the call button and heard a female voice. Miranda was furious and shouted to the caller that her husband was a married man, and followed it up by demanding that she never call that number again. When Sebastian came out of the bathtub, Miranda made a scandal about it. The woman screamed, scolding her husband, while he looked at her calmly during this scene. Only after the woman squatted down and covered her face with her palms did he say, "What did you want from me? I waited all these years that you supported me, telling my father to give me the business, but you did not make a step in this direction, and you know very well that you and I are estranged on that basis. Don't you love me at all? Let's not talk about it," the man said irritably, and went into the kitchen. Miranda followed her husband. As soon as she sat down at the table, she asked him if he was going to divorce her. Sebastian was a little silent, and then answered that he had not thought about this question yet. And Clara realized with horror that now their marriage was under threat, and it was quite possible that a divorce could take place. The whole next day, the woman thought about how to change the situation. And then she remembered that her spouse said that their scandals most often occur on the basis of the fact that the father did not fulfill his promise. Decided that she could only save the family if she got the consent of her father to transfer to the firm to the spouse. The very next day, she visited her parents, where she approached her father. Miranda said that David was not acting nicely and was not keeping a man's word. The landlord looked at his daughter and quietly asked, "Are you sure you want me to sign over the firm to Sebastian?" "Yes," Miranda answered firmly. "And if I tell you that he has a woman on the side, you will also ask me to give the firm to your lover. I know about the mistress, and I ask you to keep your promise, please," said the daughter sadly, and tears rolled down her eyes. And after a while, Sebastian became the owner of the company. David stopped working and gave the reins to his son-in-law. Miranda rejoiced and hoped that her life would return to its usual course and her husband would stop going to the left. The woman's dreams came true. Sebastian was actually now rushing home after work. The man began to go around with his spouse again and spoke affectionate words to her. However, Miranda's joy was short-lived. The whole thing is that when David transferred his business to his son-in-law, then he began to feel himself not a necessary person. About this, the man told his spouse. Lisa scolded her husband for these thoughts, saying that it was not true. The one seemed to listen to the words of his wife, but still worried. And in connection with this, he had a heart attack. The man lived after that for 3 days and then passed away. After the funeral, Miranda felt a kind of guilt before his father. It was she who insisted that her father rewrote the company to Sebastian, and she shared her thoughts with her husband, who gently embraced her and said, "You shouldn't beat yourself up over your daddy's passing. David, apparently, it was written on the fate to live so much, and you are not to blame. But my mom said that after my dad stopped going to work, he just kind of slumped overnight. I didn't kick my father-in-law out of the firm. He could have kept working there. Let's not talk about sad things. Put those thoughts out of your mind. Anyway, you promised me a royal dinner tonight, and I'm looking forward to it. Go on, get in the kitchen and set the table. Especially now Cindy should be coming in from her walk." The wife responded by kissing her husband gently on the lips and followed him into the kitchen. The woman took out from the oven a fragrant duck that was stuffed with apples. Miranda put the tray on the table, and at that moment, the doorbell rang. The landlady hummed unhappily, thought her daughter had forgotten her house keys again. The woman went to the door and pulled it open and saw her daughter's friends on the doorstep, who were in tears. Miranda felt a chilling coldness clutching her heart and quietly asked what happened. The guys began to tell each other that they went for a walk, and Cindy suggested that everyone jump from the roofs of the garages into the snowdrifts. Everyone took the girl's suggestion enthusiastically, and soon they were standing on the roof. The first to jump was Cindy. She did a flip in the air and fell into a snowdrift. Then came the girl's desperate scream. As it turned out later, Cindy fell on the Iron Dome, which was not visible in the snowdrift. The impact came just above her chest. Miranda, hearing the children's story, screamed desperately at the cry, came running to the husband, who had not yet heard what his daughter's friends were saying. Sebastian grabbed his spouse by the shoulders and began to shake her, but she only screamed, "Our girl is in trouble." The head of the family turned to the guys and asked them to tell them in a nutshell what had happened. When Sebastian found out about the accident, he ordered his wife to get dressed immediately, said that they were now on their way to the hospital where they would find out everything about their daughter's condition. A short time later, the couple was already in the emergency room where Cindy was hospitalized. Miranda was sitting on the couch and sobbing convulsively. Sebastian, on the other hand, was pacing nervously in the hospital corridor. He was waiting for the doctor who was currently stitching up the girl's wound. It took a little over an hour before the doctor came down to see Cindy's parents. The medic approached the couple and informed them that the girl was fine, and she was now sleeping. The man also added that it would be possible to visit her tomorrow, and now it is better not to disturb the child. Miranda wanted to object to the doctor, but he looked strictly at the visitor and firmly said, "If you want your girl to be well, I ask you not to contradict me, but to fulfill my request." Sebastian answered the doctor with a nod. Afterwards, he hugged his wife and explained that they should listen to the doctor. The woman buried her face in her husband's chest and cried harder. Then the doctor called a nurse and asked the girl to bring a sedative. All that night, Miranda did not sleep. She thought about how her baby was in the hospital without her. The woman wished that morning would come sooner. She couldn't wait to hug her daughter and say both words. In the morning, the couple was on their way to the hospital. On the way, they bought tangerines, apples, bananas, as well as various sweets. Mother and father wanted to please their daughter with something. And now Sebastian and his wife are in the room of Cindy, who is lying on the bed under the drip. Miranda gently strokes her daughter's cheek and tries to hold back her tears. The girl sees that her mother is very worried about her, as well as her father. Cindy feels her guilt in front of her parents, and so she utters, "You will forgive me. I was the one who initiated those jumps. Don't apologize, daughter. Just promise me and Daddy that you won't do such reckless acts again," affectionately said the mother. "I give my word, my favorite mommy and Daddy. You know, I'll be a midshipman forever. That's what the doctor told me." "How do you understand that?" Miranda asked, perplexed. And then, instead of Cindy, Zhenya had not yet answered a man's voice. It entered the doctor, who heard the girl's last words. The doctor informed that Cindy will have a scar in the area of her chest. And then the medic approached the child and cheerfully said, "Sometimes scars adorn not only the man, but also the fairer sex. But I already told you that." Cindy stayed in the hospital for about 2 weeks. During this time, she was visited not only by her parents, but also by her grandmother and friends with whom she was on the roof of the garages. The girl was eagerly awaiting discharge, and when that day came, she went up to the attending physician and uttered, "I'm going to keep this scar as a symbol of my unconscious act. Do you think that's the right thing to do?" The man in the white coat smiled at the girl's words and then quietly said that it was up to her to decide. And then, added Cindy, that in her life never again appear scars on her body, as well as scars on her soul, and wished the patient all the best. Time was running out. Next thing you know, Cindy was already finishing 7th grade as her grandmother became ill. Miranda realized that Lisa needed care and suggested that her husband hire a nurse. Sebastian refused this to his wife, arguing that she herself can take care of her mother. And with bewilderment said, "But I cannot be a mistress for 2 houses, especially my mother lives in the center. There is another option. Let your mother sell the cottage, which she is no longer very necessary, and give the money to me. I'll use the money for business, and we'll have extra income to spend on Lisa's care." Do you have any idea what you're talking about? It's Mom's summer house, and it's up to her to decide what to do with the property. And even if she agrees to it, it takes time to sell it, just like your side business. And for your information, do you need care now? How's that? You know, I've got 2 options for you, and it's up to you to decide which one you want. Miranda decided to talk to her mom about it. However, Lisa, when she heard what her son-in-law advised, became angry and said that Sebastian was burying her alive. Offering to sell the cottage, the elderly woman told her daughter that a property outside the city would be like a lifeline if times got tough. Lisa added to Miranda that she would always be able to sell the cottage. But now was not the right time to do it, and Clara spent several days thinking how she could get out of the situation. She could not leave her mother alone, and to travel from one end of the city to the other was also not an option. And then the woman came to the aid of her neighbor Lisa, who said that she would take care of Miranda's mother on weekdays for a small fee, and when Miranda would be off, she would live with her mother. And the woman agreed to the neighbor's offer. Life moved on in a measured fashion. Miranda went to her mother's house with her daughter on her last day of work and spent 2 weekends there. Several months passed at this pace. Miranda decided to leave her daughter with her grandmother on Sunday and go to her husband's house. The woman wanted to be alone with her husband, and so she has already arrived home on the way. Having bought champagne and fruit, Miranda purposely did not notify her lover, as she wanted to make him an unexpected surprise. The woman quietly opened the front door and froze in the hallway as she heard the laughter of a stranger. Miranda understood the situation immediately and immediately went into the hall, where she saw it in the semi-nude form of her husband, who held in his arms Blonde. The landlady screamed Sebastian, not expecting the arrival of his wife. With amazement looked at her and asked what she was doing here on this day. After all, she should be at her mother's. Miranda was furious at her husband's question and spoke hysterically. "Have you forgotten that this is my apartment? How could you? Bringing all sorts of fallen women into our abode. So I understand that you have no money to take care of my mother. And to provide for your mistresses, you always have the money in your pocket." With those words, Miranda rushed to the chair where the stranger's belongings lay. The woman grabbed the clothes, threw them in the blonde's direction, and loudly commanded her to get dressed and get out of here immediately. "And I don't want to see your foot here ever again. If you listen, you'll be sorry. You're not in charge here, darling," calmly said immediately husband, and immediately added, "This is also my apartment. And do not offend my swallow, as I'm going to live with her, not with you. And it's a matter already settled." And with these words, the man got up and began to dress casually. Miranda looked at her husband and could not believe that the man she loved had betrayed her once again. She watched as the lover helped the stranger to dress. After that, the couple left the apartment. The mistress, after the departure of her husband, and his mistress sat in a daze for some time. She could not even understand what she should do at the moment. And then the woman, as if came out of a stupor, desperately angry with tears. She realized that from that moment on, she no longer had a spouse. A few days later, Miranda received a call from her husband and said that he was filing for divorce with the division of property. The woman listened to the chosen one, asked him to come to his senses and not to leave the family, at least for the sake of the child. Sebastian was adamant and said that his decision will not change. Miranda did not tell her mother all this news, as well as her daughter. However, Cindy, who had not seen her father for several days, who did not come to spend the night, asked where Daddy had gone, and I realized that there was no point in hiding it from my daughter. So I told Cindy that she and her husband were getting a divorce. The girl looked at her mother in amazement and asked what was the reason. A banal reason. Your father has fallen in love with another woman and wants to start a family with her. You do not resent your father for this. Understand that in life it happens when feelings between people are frozen. So you don't love your father anymore? Quietly asked the daughter. I can't answer you anything, as there is an emptiness in my soul. I only ask you not to say anything to your grandmother. She doesn't need to worry. Soon the court took place, at which Miranda learned that the 2-room apartment is divided into 3 parts, and if she wants to keep the property, she must pay some share to her spouse. The woman immediately said that she did not have that amount. Sebastian then indicated that he was willing to give the money. Miranda so that the apartment would remain in his possession. The woman tried to defend her rights in court, saying that the property was given to them by her father. However, she was immediately informed that the apartment was given to both of them. Miranda tried to challenge the court's ruling that the cars and business had previously belonged to her dad as well. But even here she failed, as all the papers of the deceased David executed a deed of gift in the name of Sebastian. All these court cases were a heavy burden on Miranda's shoulders. She never thought that the man she loved would do to her in such a way. And the most unpleasant thing was that there was even an inventory of household appliances, as well as furniture and kitchen utensils. Miranda was disgusted with sharing all this. She said to her now ex-husband, I didn't realize you were such a petty person. You can keep everything in the apartment. We will not claim it, but you have a daughter growing up. How are you going to look her in the eye? And I'm not going to hurt Cindy. When she grows up, I'm going to help out financially. Right now, I'm going to pay child support. After the trial, Miranda and her daughter packed up their personal belongings. Cindy put in a bag, jeans, t-shirts, underwear. And then her gaze came across a photo on which she was pictured with her parents. The girl promptly got up from her chair and ran to the desk. She grabbed the framed photo and threw it to the floor with all her might. At the same moment, the sound of breaking glass was heard. Miranda came running to the noise. The woman saw that there were shards of framed glass on the floor. She immediately assessed the situation and approached her daughter with the words, I understand that you are angry, but smashing things is not the way out of the situation. You can't understand how much I hate my father at the moment. He'd even share a dining room set with us. I'm in a trance over his actions. A friend's parents are recently divorced, too. Her dad just took his stuff, and that's it. And my dad started sharing everything. It's disgusting. I'm not making a big deal out of it. Just realize that you and I are superior in this situation because we're not taking anything but our personal belongings. And at that moment, Sebastian entered the room, wanting to make sure his ex-wife had already packed up her Corinne's belongings as soon as she saw her father. Shouted in tears to him that he was the most real traitor, and she would definitely take revenge on him for that. The man calmly listened to the angry words of his daughter and said in response, Now you are speaking on emotion. It is possible that you are being motherized against me, but one day you will grow up, and this situation will reconsider already with your own view. This is purely my personal opinion, and Mom has nothing to do with it. On the contrary, she's trying to make me stop hating you. But she can't do it. I want you to know that you are the most hated person in the world." A few days later, Miranda and her daughter moved in with Lisa, the elderly woman. As soon as she saw her daughter with many bags, she immediately guessed what had happened. She hugged her granddaughter and then Miranda and said softly, "That's what it was all about. So girls, let's not write about it, but instead have a celebration. The three of us will endure everything and live with all our enemies, in spite of them, in comfort, enjoying life." After Miranda and her daughter changed their place of residence, the woman transferred Cindy to another school closer to home. She herself also went to work at another bank. Miranda tried not to think about her ex-spouse. She wanted to cut that man out of her life completely. The most important thing for her now was only one thing: to keep her mother alive as long as possible and to make her daughter happy in the future. A year had passed since the divorce. Miranda's mother passed away suddenly. The woman organized the funeral with her own efforts. She very much, by the way, came to the money that she received from her ex-husband for a share in a 2-room apartment. Miranda buried her mother next to her father, and after a while installed black marble monuments on the graves. Several years passed. During this time, Cindy graduated from high school and entered college. The girl decided not to change family traditions and become like her mother and grandmother, an accountant. During these years, Miranda's ex-husband never once visited his daughter, although he faithfully paid alimony. Cindy was even grateful to her father that he did not seek meetings with her. The girl still hated her father for his betrayal. Miranda all these years lived only for the sake of her daughter. For her often tried to court representatives of the stronger sex, but all their attempts the woman stopped at the root, which surprised her familiar friends. Cindy also wondered why her mother does not try to arrange a personal life. And one day there was a conversation between them. The girl turned to her mother. "You are so beautiful. You have such a slender figure that can envy the model. And you all alone. Yes, alone. Why don't you want to get together with some man? Isn't it bad for you that Mom lives only for you?" Mother asked with a smile. "It's good, but it's not right. You are not old at all, and you can start a family with a decent man. And I'll love a guy someday too. Which means kicking me out of my parents' nest, and you'll have to live on your own. You know, daughter, I don't want to commit to anyone else. I got burned once. I still have a wound on my soul that won't scar. And about falling out of the nest soon, you won't forget to visit your mommy." "Of course not. Tell me, Mommy, do you still love Daddy?" That's a hard question, and I can't answer. To be honest, I remember Sebastian, but only those moments when we were happy with him. But the last years I try to erase from my memory. I just want to think about that man. That's good. Probably the folk saying is true that you will love, love, and Goat edifyingly said, "And the daughter." "You, my folk philosopher," laughing, said the mother and immediately added, "Go, let's wash up, and we'll have dinner. By the way, I have a proposal to go this summer to the Dacha and see what's left of it. We haven't been there for 2 years. What do you think? Sounds like fun, but we have to live to see the summer." Some time passed, summer came, and Miranda took a vacation, and soon mother and daughter were already riding on the train out of town, and Miranda was talking to Cindy, and she herself watched how opposite. A young man cast admiring glances at her daughter. The woman involuntarily looked at Cindy and mentally thought what a beautiful daughter she had. Soon Cindy and her mother were standing outside the cottage. Miranda looked sorrowfully, and her mood had fallen. Cindy noticed this and asked why her mother had fallen asleep. The woman pointed her hand in the direction of the cottage and answered that it was no longer a cottage, but a den for homeless vagrants. Miranda approached the fence and only wanted to open the wicket as it creaked out onto the ground. The woman turned to her daughter and sighed brokenly. Cindy jumped up to her mother, hugged her, and said, "Maybe we'll rent this house, but not for a fee, but for people to repair this shanty. Who would need this junk to live in it? Your grandfather used to fix this place up when he was alive. How long has he been alive? He's gone. I think we should sell this so-called house and put the money in an account. We'll need the money in the future. Maybe you're right. I told you to find a decent man and start a family, and you're always against it. And now if I had a husband with me, we'd renovate this place. This place needs a man's hands to fix it up. In fact, it seems to me that this hovel should be torn down and a new hut built. Again, you start sermons about matchmaking, said in response Mother jokingly threatened with her fist, and immediately followed by adding, we will sell, at least for a place of money to learn. Miranda managed to sell the dacha only by the end of the summer. The woman received little money, as she had absolutely no skill, profitable to paint the merits of the plot. But Miranda was happy, and this money, which she immediately put on a bank card. Time moved on imperceptibly. And now Cindy was graduating from college. The girl dreamed of getting a job as soon as possible. Moreover, her mother agreed with the management of the bank, where she herself worked, so that Cindy was taken to the credit institution. Cindy worked under her mother's supervision. Before graduating from college, there were only a few days left, and the girl was returning home after studying. She was passing near the cafe when she smelled the aroma of fresh, overbrewed coffee. Cindy could not resist the temptation and looked into the cafe. The girl knew very well that this establishment was not a cheap one, but the aroma was too tempting. Cindy sat down at a table, and a waiter came to her at once. A young guy handed her a menu, but the girl gestured that she only wanted a cup of coffee. The waiter nodded with a displeased look and moved away from the table. The girl had to wait just a couple of minutes as a young man in a uniform already placed in front of her a clay miniature cup with a flavorful drink. Cindy thanked the waiter, and when he stepped away, she looked around. There were few people in the cafe, and they were mostly young people sitting in pairs. The girl at this moment thought how romantic it would be to sit here with a young man and talk peacefully to the sound of a melody. And only Cindy took the cup of coffee with 2 fingers by the handle, as behind herself she heard a man's voice, which was clearly addressing her. The girl looked back unhappily. She did not want at the moment to be interrupted from savoring the aromatic drink. And when Cindy turned around, she saw a status tall guy in front of her, who, smiling amiably, said, "Can I break your loneliness? Especially since I always take this table. It is not written here that this is your place." Without noticing it, the girl replied in a hostile tone, "I will consider that you just told me to sit next to you." Without stopping smiling, spoke the stranger, and at the same moment sat down. Opposite the girl to him instantly came the waiter and took the order. Meanwhile, the young man, not paying attention to the hostility of the girl, extended his hand to her and politely said, "My name is Kevin." "And what do they call you?" "And you are an impudent type. First of all, sat down at the table without waiting for my consent. Second of all, you want to meet me, when I don't want to do that. It's too late to back out. Since you know my name, I'll have to tell you mine too. I promise I won't tell anyone else the name of my charming companion. And you are also a cheeky type." With a laugh said the girl, and immediately continued, "All right, you've persuaded though, or rather, imposed your communication. My name is Cindy." After that, the young people casually chatted. For some time, Kevin tried to maintain an easy conversation. The girl was well aware that the guy knows how to make the interlocutor feel at ease. This fact impressed Cindy, but at the same time a little deterred her. She feared that in this way the guy would become an obsessive beau. But this did not happen. After an hour spent talking in the cafe, the young man offered to exchange phone numbers and apologize that he could not walk the girl home. He explained that at the moment he had urgent business to attend to. Cindy dictated her phone number, and then the young man gallantly said goodbye and left the cafe. The girl only had time to notice that the guy got into a beautiful foreign car, and the car soon moved. After the acquaintance, several days passed. Cindy kept waiting for a call from Bone. The girl, involuntarily for herself, often thought about the new acquaintance. and it began to annoy her. She tried to push away the thoughts of the guy, but she failed. When a week passed after a fleeting meeting, Cindy did not hope that the young man would make himself known. But it happened when the girl sat at home and read a lecture. It was already 12 o'clock when the bell rang. Cindy looked at the cell phone with surprise and thought that it was probably a wrong number. She dropped the call, but the ringing repeated. The girl picked up the phone with irritation and wanted to say rude things, as heard the voice of Kevin, who greetingly said, "Do not hurry." Still prickly, especially found time to call, that he wanted to hear your voice and meet tomorrow in the same cafe, but only a little later. "I want to see you there at 18 o'clock. Cindy only wanted to answer the bard. How did the receiver beeped? The girl was angry that she was not allowed to finish and decided to call herself to tell Kevin that this is not how real men behave. She dialed the guy, but the man dropped the call. The girl made several more attempts, but the result was the same. Cindy didn't make any more calls. She lay on the bed and thought about the young man, as a few minutes later came a text message from Bone, which said, "I know, pissed off, but this way you will definitely come to the cafe." Cindy, after reading the message, laughed merrily and thought, how enterprising is this guy? And only after that the girl turned on her side and soon fell asleep. In the morning, she was awakened by her mom, who was interested. Asked who had called Cindy that night. The girl was embarrassed by her mother's question and lied, saying it was a wrong number. At the appointed hour, Cindy arrived at the cafe, where she saw Kevin at the table. He was sitting and looking at a newspaper. The girl came up and said sternly that she wanted such late calls to be no more. The young man looked at the girl's stern face and, trying to hold back laughter, promised that such a thing would not happen again. And then the guy offered Cindy to sit down and order, but she only asked for a cup of coffee. The young people talked for a long time. Kevin asked the interlocutor to tell about herself. The girl did not resist and briefly told about herself, and then asked the man to do the same. Kevin said that he was graduating from a foreign language university and was 25 years old. After this meeting, Kevin began to call Cindy frequently. They met rarely, as the young man kept saying that he had urgent matters to attend to. Cindy was often annoyed by this fact, and when a month passed from their acquaintance, she directly asked the guy what kind of business he had that required such a hurry. The guy smiled in response and replied that the time would come, and she would find out. Cindy decided that she would not pressure the young man and would wait for the moment when he himself wanted to tell everything. The girl's mother noticed that her daughter has been behaving in a very mysterious way lately. When Cindy is called, she tries to howl in the stairwell or tightly closes the door to her room. And this never used to happen before, and it also seemed strange to Miranda that her daughter, if she goes out in the evenings, she does not call her friends beforehand. So the woman decided to call Cindy for a frank conversation. She said, "Is it just me, or is it? Are you really in love? Why would you think that? When I fell in love, I acted that way. I became secretive. How are you now?" The woman said with a smile, "I've got a young man, but it's just a simple conversation that doesn't involve anything. I can't tell you more than that." After this conversation, a week passed and Cindy met Kevin. They were driving around town and chatting merrily as always. Just then a young man pulled into a small prologue and slowed down. The girl looked at Kostya with surprise, and he confessed his feelings to her in full earnest. Cindy was amazed at the words of the guy and asked softly, "What is this?" "A marriage proposal. It's not quite right, but it's almost right. You don't have to tell me. You probably have urgent matters again that prevent you from speaking in no riddles. Don't be angry. Just give me some time, and I'll explain everything to you." A week passed after that conversation. The girl was already planning to get a job at her mother's place, and before going out to work at the bank, she decided to update her closet. Cindy told her mom about her idea, and she gladly supported it. Miranda gave her daughter the money and wished her a good shopping trip. Cindy wanted to buy herself a white strict blouse and a pencil skirt. The girl went to the city center to an expensive boutique. She looked at the blouses for a long time and stopped on two, which were completely different in style. Cindy was already approaching, for example, in the booth, as she noticed a familiar figure. It was Kevin, and next to him stood a spectacular brunette who was twirling near the mirror and enthusiastically told the man a fancy suit. "Thank you, honey. This will be my present from you for our 3 years of marriage." Cindy at that moment could not believe her ears. That the brunette had said that. The girl moved closer to the couple, and at the same moment she saw that Bone had a wedding ring on her right ring finger. Cindy felt a bad though, and by an effort of will she forced herself to restrain a cry of disappointment. And at the same second the young man turned around, who realized everything from the girl's face. Cindy with one lip said to the guy only one word, "I hate," and after that she gave the blouses to the saleswoman, who did not even have time to try them on. Cindy ran outside and got into a cab, giving her address. She flew home and locked herself in her room. Miranda was puzzled as to what had befallen her daughter. She heard Cindy crying and asked her to open the door to talk to her. Meanwhile, Cindy's cell phone rang incessantly, but she did not answer it. Only after some time the girl came out of her room and headed for the bathroom. But Miranda stopped her and hugged her gently, and then offered to go to the kitchen to drink tea. The landlady sat her daughter on a chair and softly said, "And now, my sunshine, tell Mommy what happened." Cindy sobs explained to her mom that she has been dating for a little over 2 months now with a young man, and he had just recently confessed his love to her, and in doing so made it clear that he was going to propose to her. And today Cindy found out that he has a wife to whom the man has been married for 3 years. And then the girl talked about meeting the guy at a boutique. When the daughter finished talking, Miranda stroked her head and asked her to calm down, and then asked if this young man was the one who was calling everything at this particular time. Cindy nodded in response. Then Miranda said that it was necessary to give the man a chance to speak. The girl looked at her mother in bewilderment and said, "Why should I do that? He has deceived me. Do you want me to hear another fairy tale from this liar? Why didn't you just give him the word? And then you're gonna take it out on me. Don't you want to know what a man who's obviously in your heart has to say? Don't tell me I'm wrong about the last part." Miranda said quietly, "Okay, Mom, I'll talk to him." Soon the girl answered the phone. Sebastian asked to meet her for at least half an hour. Cindy told the place where she would wait for him and the time. Soon the young people saw each other. The man this time had a ring on his finger. The girl, seeing it on the guy's hand, involuntarily twitched her shoulders. This movement did not escape the young man, and he spoke. "Yes, I am married, and I have concealed this fact from myself. But the whole point is that I'm going to get a divorce. Our marriage is a mistake. My wife, Christina, a spoiled, capricious girl, and after living with her for 1.5 years, I realized I made a mistake marrying her. But the thing is, her father has a lot of connections, and he's a big man in this town. And now I want to go abroad for 1 year. I already told Christina that I have a sweetheart, and it's you. When she found out, she told me I'd never get an internship. And I told you what that means to me. What kind of fairy tale are you trying to tell me? In this case, I haven't lied to you a single word. If you want me to turn down the internship, I'll take the papers and file for divorce right now. You're very precious to me, and I don't want to lose you. When I saw you in the cafe, I immediately realized that this is the kind of woman I need in my life, who behaves independently, does not build a figure. I don't know how else to prove to you that I love you. It's up to you. What do I have to do? And I can't believe it all at once. You should have told me all this at once, and not after I saw you in the boutique, trying to hold back tears," said the girl. "Are you right? I should have said it beforehand. I was cowardly, and I'm not going to make excuses for it now. And now I've suggested to you that I should call my wife in front of you and tell her that we're splitting up. I don't want any internship. You don't have to call anybody. Just give me time to think about it. Now I'm tired and I'm going home. Don't walk me home. And don't call me. I'll call you later when I've fought it over." After that, the girl turned and hurried home. On the way, she pondered the young man's words. She really wanted to believe that everything Sebastian had told her would actually be true. Coming home, Cindy held nothing back. Told about everything to her mother, Miranda, after her daughter's narration reflected. The woman saw that her girl was suffering as she was in love with this young man, and Miranda asked only 2 questions to her daughter. "Do you yourself trust what you have heard? What does your heart tell you, mother? I love him, and I've seen him speak his heart with sincerity. But for some reason, my mind resists it. I don't know what to do. What would you do in my situation? I trust a woman's intuition, and I trust my heart. But you take my advice, don't take it into account. I don't want you to think it's my fault. But if you want, I can meet Sebastian and talk to him. But I don't think I can tell from the first meeting what kind of man he really is. Don't, Mommy. You've done a good job of helping me now." The daughter said gratefully and hugged her mother tenderly. Cindy thought about it for a few days. During this time, Sebastian did not call her because he promised not to disturb her until she made a decision. In the meantime, the girl was as if between 2 fires. She did not know what to do in this situation. After all, on the one hand, she wanted to be with this man always, as she loved the man with all her heart. And on the other hand, Cindy was afraid that the guy would just take advantage of her naivety and deceive her. And yet the girl made a decision. Her feelings for Sebastian won, and she risked to trust this man. Now Cindy only had to decide what to do. Choose the option that the guy went to an internship or right now announce to his wife that he takes a divorce, and at the same time forget about abroad. The girl knew how important this internship was for Sebastian and realized that if they suggest to her lover to tell his wife about the divorce, then later she herself will regret that she acted in such a way. And soon Cindy called the chosen one and scheduled a meeting. As soon as the young people met, the girl told the guy about her decision, and immediately added that if he started a double game, it will all return to him 100-fold in the future. Sebastian, hearing that Cindy was not going to break off the relationship with him with fervor, said, "What other game? I love you and I want to be together. Since you haven't called, I've been exhausted. And I had a little surprise for you." With these words, the guy took out of his jacket pocket a red box. He handed it to the girl and quietly said, "Very soon you and I will legalize our relationship, and now I gave you this ring as a sign that you are already a shrine." Time slowly went on. The young people met occasionally, but called each other almost every day. Sebastian always asked how the girl was doing. And at the same time, he did not forget to tell Cindy how much he loved her and missed her. Miranda saw that her daughter had recovered her spirits and was happy for her, but the woman's heart was heavy. She herself did not know what was troubling her. And when Cindy came back from another date pensive, she turned to her daughter and asked her why she was sad. The daughter looked at her mother and spoke in a whisper. "Sebastian is leaving in a few days. We won't see him for 6 months. He won't call much. But you know that yourself, my daughter. But you knew you were going to be separated, and you should be ready for it." "I know, Mom, but it's still very hard for me to be away from him for so long. I have a small favor to ask of you. Can I spend the day after tomorrow with Sebastian?" "Don't worry, he didn't ask for it. It's my decision." Miranda looked sadly at her daughter after her words. She was silent for a while, thinking about how to answer her daughter's request, and then after a short pause she said, "You're not 18 years old anymore, and you're making your own decision. And if you want to be with this person all day, then you are going to take this step consciously, and you will not be stopped by my refusal, although I'm not going to talk you out of anything. All I can say is, don't make a mistake in your decision, so you won't regret it later." Sebastian soon left. Cindy was in a depressed mood after the departure of her lover. Miranda saw that her daughter was trying to appear cheerful, but the woman realized that it was only for show. Miranda tried her best to distract Cindy from her sad thoughts, and when a month had passed since Sebastian's departure, and there was still no news from him, the woman suggested that her daughter go shopping. The girl looked at her mother disapprovingly and said, "I don't have time to dress up now. I understand you, but are you really throwing away your own mother? Who told you I don't want to look elegant?" Cindy looked at her mother in surprise. She had already forgotten the last time her mother had bought herself. Miranda realized that she had achieved her goal as she had stumped her daughter with a suggestion, which was exactly what she was seeking at the moment. After all, she didn't really need her again. And Cindy, when she had recovered from her initial emotions, turned to her mother. "I missed something. Did you get a man?" "No, but maybe I'm going to get some old bachelor," the woman said with a laugh. Another month flew by and Cindy, sitting at home with her mother, was talking about accounting after work. Just at that moment, her cell phone rang. The girl jumped up as Miranda had already and ran to grab the phone. And soon Miranda heard her daughter happily talking on the cell phone. The landlady immediately guessed that Sebastian had called. And in fact, a few minutes later, a happy Cindy came in and said that her lover had called. Several months passed. During this time, Sebastian called and sent text messages several times. And soon the young man said that he would come home for a week to celebrate the new year. Cindy was thrilled with the news. Miranda saw how her daughter was happy about the event, but it seemed to her that the girl was celebrating prematurely. And so a few days before the arrival of the young man, Cindy said, "And I am glad that your chosen one is coming soon. But don't get too excited, because he will probably spend New Year's Eve not with you, but with his wife. You know how to ruin the mood, Mom. When Sebastian arrives, we'll find out." "On the C and the eyebrows," replied the daughter. The long-awaited day came. Sebastian arrived. The young man, already a couple of hours after his arrival, called Cindy. Cindy happily promised that she would try to get off work early. Miranda looked at her daughter and realized how much Cindy was looking forward to seeing her boyfriend. The woman approached her daughter and said that she was free for the day. The girl gratefully hugged her mother and quickly left the bank. Miranda let her daughter go and wished her happiness mentally. Soon the woman came home. Then Cindy called and said that she would not come to spend the night. This news did not surprise the landlady, as she assumed that this would happen. After all, her daughter had been so much time apart from her favorite person. The next day was Saturday. Miranda woke up and, as usual, looked into Cindy's room, who was not there. The woman looked at the empty bed in bewilderment and immediately slapped herself on the forehead. Miranda had forgotten that this night the daughter was in the company of Sebastian. The landlady then headed to the kitchen to make herself breakfast, and then her cell phone rang. The woman picked up the phone and heard the happy voice of her daughter, Mamulia. "Hi, we'll be there soon, wait for us. But I didn't cook anything." "You couldn't have warned me from the evening," the mother said confusedly. "You don't have to cook anything. We'll bring everything with us." And within a couple hours, Miranda was already meeting her daughter with her young man, who was holding a bouquet of flowers. Sebastian smiled and handed the flowers to the woman. Miranda thanked the man and invited him into the hall, where a table was already set up with a spread of sausage and cheese and several vases of homemade straws. In a few minutes, everyone was already seated at the table. Cindy was merrily counting the many interesting things Sebastian had told her about being abroad. Miranda listened to her daughter and looked furtively at her guest. The woman noted that the young man was handsome and behaved correctly. The landlady liked this fact. Meanwhile, Cindy kept talking and talking, and then she was politely interrupted by Sebastian. "Darling, have you forgotten that we brought sushi with us? Maybe we should put them on the table." The girl splashed her hands after the guy's words and went to the hallway, where the grocery bag had been left. Meanwhile, Sebastian turned to the landlady. He said, "You are interested in a lot of things, and I understand that. You can ask me anything you want. I have nothing to hide. Young man, all I care about is the fate of my daughter. Tell me you'll never give her up." "No, she's dear to me. And about New Year's Eve, I'm going to celebrate it with you, if you don't mind." "I will be grateful to you for this," with a smile replied the woman, who did not expect these words from her daughter's lover. Yes, it went by very quickly, and Sebastian went abroad again. But now that Miranda got to know the guy, she felt at ease. She believed that the young man treated her daughter sincerely. 2 weeks had passed. After Sebastian left, Cindy was returning home with her mother. They were walking, discussing working moments, as the girl's phone rang. Cindy happily pulled out her cell phone as she thought it was her chosen one calling. But she was mistaken. The girl saw an unknown number. She answered and heard an unfamiliar female voice that said, "I can hear Cindy. Yes, you are speaking to me. We need to meet. It's about Sebastian." The stranger spoke quickly and then dictated where to come and what time. Cindy wanted to ask a couple of questions, but the connection on the other end was already disconnected. The girl shrugged her shoulders in bewilderment. Her mother, seeing her daughter's amazement, asked who had called. Cindy said that it was a wrong number. After a while, the girl told Miranda that she had to go out on business. Cindy was puzzled by this call from a stranger, but she did not want to bother her mother for nothing. So she hid from her that she was going to a meeting. The girl hailed a cab and gave the driver the address to go to. The chauffeur looked at the girl with surprise and asked her if she was sure she had to take her there. Cindy answered in the affirmative, and in half an hour the girl was there. She let go of the car and looked around. It was an abandoned construction site. Cindy was surprised that the meeting was scheduled in such a place. Just then the girl saw a foreign car pull up and a brunette woman get out of it. Cindy immediately recognized the young woman. It was Sebastian's wife. Christina leisurely approached the girl and looked at her with disdain. Cindy endured the gaze and coldly inquired as to why this meeting was necessary. Christina grinned, and then she muttered stiffly that she wanted Cindy out of her husband's life forever, and then added, "You'd better not confront me. My father is a lieutenant colonel, and he has the power to do a lot of bad things to those who obey me. Listen, Christina, don't scare me. Sebastian, you're not loved and you know it. Why would you cut off pieces of love when you know your husband's heart belongs to someone else? If I were you, I'd just give him a divorce as soon as he gets back from his internship, although your desire for a divorce doesn't really matter anymore. That's because Sebastian has already decided he's not going to live with you. How did you find me, by the way? Finding you wasn't a problem. I knew my husband had a woman on the side. He has them a lot. It's just his personality. So don't be fooled into thinking you're his one and only. He'll play with you and leave you, like he's done with everyone before. If your husband's such a womanizer, then why did you call me here? You said yourself that Sebastian will play with you and dump you, but you don't have to answer that. I'll speak for you. You just realized that Sebastian really loves me and wants to be with me. But you didn't answer my question about how you found me on your husband's phone. I found your number. I take it there's no way to work things out with you. No, then you're gonna regret it, Christina said angrily. And what will you do to me? Cindy said mockingly. How about this? And with these words, the brunette opened her purse, from where she took out a small vial and with a quick movement, spilled the contents of the bottle on the face of her interlocutor. Cindy screamed and covered her face with her hands. Meanwhile, Christina Evil smirked and spoke. My husband likes beautiful girls, and your face is not as beautiful as it used to be. And don't you dare go to the police. I already told you who my father is. If you don't take my advice, you'll end up in the dock yourself. Now goodbye, girl. Cindy didn't see Christina leave. The girl fell to the ground and screamed loudly in unbearable pain. And then she lost consciousness. Cindy woke up only a few days later in the intensive care unit. The girl wanted to raise her head, but she was pierced by a terrible pain and moaned. Cindy tried to open her eyes, but she failed. At the same moment, a nurse came up to her and mouthed, "Awake. That's wonderful. I'll get the doctor now, and you'll talk to him." Soon the doctor came over, who asked the girl a few questions and then informed her that she would be moved to a room. Before leaving, the man added that Cindy was waiting to talk to the investigator. The girl responded by asking how she had ended up in the hospital. The doctor looked thoughtfully at the patient and said, "You were brought here by a homeless man who frequents the place. He found you unconscious and carried you in his arms to our hospital. By the way, he's worried about your health and came by to see how you're doing. I must give him credit for not abandoning a man in distress. You could have died of hypothermia. It's hot out, and there are other factors that could have killed you. But it's all behind me now, and I'm glad of it." After a while, the girl was moved to the ward, and Cindy's mother came to see her. The woman rushed to her daughter and hugged her. Miranda stroked the girl's arms and cried silently. Cindy heard Vanya's sobs to the mother and asked her to calm down. Miranda tried to hold back her emotions, but she failed. Just then, the door to the room fell open. A man entered. He approached the patient's bed and said softly that he was an investigator and needed to ask some questions. Miranda glared at the stranger and said, "Can't you see the girl's condition? She doesn't need your questions right now. I understand perfectly well, but now you listen to me. There's a lot of time wasted, with Cindy unconscious and the perpetrator still at large. The sooner I find out what happened that day, the more likely we are to catch this scoundrel and put him behind bars. It's in your best interest," said the Miranda man, and then turned to Cindy. "Tell us what happened that day. Please be focused in detail when you recall. Every little detail is important to us. I don't remember anything. An unknown person threw something in my face, and then darkness," Cindy said weakly. "And that's all you remember. What were you doing in that neighborhood, and what did this person look like?" "I was just walking around. I told you everything I know. That's all I have to tell you. Can I ask you to leave me alone? I'm very tired." The man looked intently at the victim's mother and asked her to go out into the corridor with him. Here, the investigator told Miranda to try to persuade her daughter to cooperate with the investigation and to try to find out from the girl what had happened that day. The woman nodded silently and headed for the room. Miranda walked over to her daughter and sat down next to her. She stroked her daughter's hands and quietly told Cindy to try to think only of the good times right now. The girl replied muffledly that all she had to do was wait for the bandage to be removed, to look at her face, and then she could enjoy life. The visitor interrupted her daughter and spoke out. "Let's not talk about it now. Better tell me what you were doing at the abandoned construction site and who threw acid in your face. Please don't lie to me, because I know you went there on purpose and you saw the face of the perpetrator who did it. Mom, from now on, this is a closed matter and please don't bring it up again." Cindy was in the hospital for over a month. During this time, the girl did not communicate with her roommate and tried to keep to herself. And when she saw her reflection in the mirror, she withdrew into herself. The doctor noticed that the patient was in a depressed state and before discharge told the girl and her mother to remove the scars as possible, but it will require several expensive operations. Now the change of appearance is only in your hands, and we on our part did everything we could. After being discharged from the hospital, Cindy quit her job, and she also changed her SIM card number. Miranda could not understand why her daughter had done this and asked her directly about it. The girl looked at her mother and without emotion said with such a face only to scare children, not to go to work, "I changed my SIM card because I don't want to communicate with Sebastian anymore. Are you afraid that Sebastian won't want to deal with you because you have scars on your face? If a man loves, he won't care about that. Because they don't love you for your looks. I don't want anything to do with him, and that's the end of it. And in general, I do not want to live without emotions," said the daughter. "What are you talking about? Have you thought about me?" the woman said excitedly. Miranda was worried about her daughter's state of mind after this conversation. She was afraid that Cindy might do something irreparable. Then one day the woman came home and saw a pile of pills on the table in the kitchen. Miranda cried out and ran to her daughter's room, where she saw the girl lying on the bed. The woman ran up to Cindy, slowed her down. The one opened her eyes and said that everything was fine, and she had not taken medication, but wanted to do so. Miranda realized after this incident that something had to be done, and then she decided that it was necessary to put her daughter in the clinic and do plastic surgery. For this purpose, the woman withdrew her savings and went to a famous specialist. The doctor examined the girl and said that the appearance can be returned, but only not the same as it was before. When Cindy heard this, she said, "I don't need my past appearance." Soon, Cindy was admitted to a clinic where the first surgery was performed. Then rehabilitation care was required, for which finances were also needed. Miranda had nothing left to do, how to take out a loan, but the money was just enough to pay for the care. And more surgeries were needed. So Miranda turned to her daughter. "You and I have one way out. Sell the apartment and move to another city, where we will buy a one-room apartment, and the rest of the money will be used for the operation and the loan repayment." "Mom, but you and I are going to live in poverty. Is that the most important thing? You're more important to me now." The decision was unanimous, the girl's mother said firmly, and then hugged her daughter tenderly. Cindy was glad that they would soon leave this town, for she knew that Sebastian would soon arrive. And that was the only reason she had talked her mother into not delaying the sale of the apartment. Miranda understood why her daughter asked her to sell the property as soon as possible, and as a result, a deal was soon made. The apartment was sold for next to nothing, and Cindy and her mother moved to a provincial town. After that, Miranda got a job again and put her daughter in the clinic for another operation. And I realized that they were going to be struggling financially right now, so I took a part-time job. She started doing bookkeeping at one of the small firms. A couple years went by. During that time, Cindy had 2 more surgeries, and now the girl was with a completely different face from the same old Cindy she had been before. Miranda was happy for her daughter that now her girl could start her life with a new leaf, and Cindy at one time was grateful to her mother for going to any lengths just to give her back the meaning of life. And one day a conversation took place between mother and daughter, the initiator of which was the girl. "Mammy, tell me, you do not regret anything that, for example, left the megalopolis in this backwoods just to give me back my face?" "That's silly. That's my girl. If I had to make another decision, I'd do the same thing. When you're a mom, you'll understand. Maybe I will someday." "Which I doubt," the girl said sadly. "Okay, openness for openness. When you got acid thrown at you, it was because of Sebastian." "Yes. Why didn't you tell the investigator?" The mother asked quietly. "We wouldn't have been able to prove anything. Christina's father works in law enforcement, and I was also afraid that Sebastian would get hurt. That's what I thought. And you still love him." Soon Cindy got a job, too, and life slowly moved on. Miranda hoped that all their sorrows were behind them now. How did her heart begin to ache? Doctors immediately said that it was necessary to quit one job, as it was an additional load on the main organ of life. The woman had no choice but to leave her position as an accountant in the firm. Cindy was glad that her mother had quit her second job. The girl now wanted her mother to not need anything, but she realized that with their salaries, they wouldn't get far. Cindy knew they were not poor, but she wanted her mother to be able to go to the sea and relax. So after work, she told Miranda, "I want to go to my father's house. I've been in touch with a classmate. She told me he started a second company. I'm gonna go and shake his wallet. Back in the day, my dad promised he'd help me, but not until I turned 18. He just disappeared from my life. I don't need to do this. Let that man live his life. And I still have a grudge against him in my soul, and I want to spill it." Years later, the girl said sadly, "That's bad that you cannot let go of resentment against your father." The mother replied sadly. A week later, Cindy told her mother that she was leaving for another city. Miranda realized that her daughter was going to the place where they had lived before. The woman tried to stop Cindy, but she was adamant. The girl explained that she would try to get a job as an accountant and earn more money so that next year they could go to the sea together. And already Cindy is in another city. She rented a room and went to look for a job. She was lucky. On her first day, she read an advertisement for an accountant in a firm that had recently opened. Cindy arrived at the appointed address and was met by the deputy director. The young man questioned the girl about her work experience and then called the boss and told him that a young woman had come to get a job as an accountant. Soon, Cindy got a job in a travel agency. The girl quickly got acquainted with the staff, which was not numerous. The staff consisted of only 7 people. Cindy learned that the firm had been in existence for a relatively short time. In a week's time, it would be a year since it had opened. The girl inquired of one of the female employees, "Why is there no director in place?" And she laughed. Answered that the boss is here very rarely. A few days passed, and the deputy director announced that the day after tomorrow, there is a corporate party on the occasion of the anniversary of the opening of the company. The entire staff amicably piled up the shot. After all, this meant that it was possible to have fun. Meanwhile, the deputy director went on to say that it was necessary to appear in dress uniform, and finally added that the supervisor would be attending the party. Cindy was curious to see for the first time her immediate director, who had hired her without even looking at her once. And so this day of the corporate party came. At the end of the working day, the office staff began to set the table. The appetizer was ordered in one of the cafes, and now when the courier brought the order, then all merrily displayed appetizers on the table. There was a relaxed atmosphere in the room while preparing everything for the party. One of the employees told a funny anecdote, and everyone present laughed. And soon the deputy director invited everyone to take a seat at the table. He called the boss and informed him that the boss would be a little late and asked him to start without him. One of the employees dashingly filled glasses and raised a toast to the prosperity of the tourism business. Everyone cheered, supported him, and emptied the flute. Then the deputy director took the role of toastmaster and asked to fill the glasses again. The young man only wanted to make a speech as the door to the room fell off and the director entered. The man welcomed everyone and said, "And I can have a splash. I want to celebrate with you." Cindy looked at the entered man and felt that her body was pierced as if by hundreds of needles. The girl recognized the man immediately. She suppressed the exclamation within her and lowered her eyes. Cindy tried to calm her breathing. In the meantime, the boss came in and, seeing the new employee, exclaimed, "What beauties we have working for us. I'll sit next to the new girl with my staff. We have to be on the same footing." And then the fun began. One toast after another followed. Everyone cheerfully applauded every speech, and meanwhile on the floor of the exhausted new boss dragged her into the office, where he closed the door on the lock. After that, the man began to carefully undo the buttons on the white blouse, and then he saw a familiar scar on her chest. The owner of the office was confused. He had seen such a scar in the form of a triangle only on one girl. Cindy, seeing how dumbfounded the man was, she said in an inebriated voice, "What are you, Sebastian?" He stopped. "Go on." Cindy, "Well, it's impossible. I've been looking all over for you. I can see how I've looked. Now I can only see that you are late female employees and then dragged to your office to have fun." With a grin, said the girl. Then she lowered her head and fell asleep. The girl woke up on the couch. She threw the blanket and saw that she was wearing the same clothes that she had worn at the corporate party. The girl looked around and immediately recognized the setting. This was Sebastian's apartment. Cindy tried to get up, but immediately felt her head split in two. She groaned involuntarily and closed her eyes, and at the same moment she caught the smell of fresh emergency coffee. The girl opened her eyes again and saw Sebastian in front of her, who was holding her nose. The young man walked over and knelt down in front of the guest, and then the man handed the girl a cup of coffee and offered to bolster her strength. The girl refused the huge drink and asked for a glass of plain water. Hearing Cindy's request, Sebastian laughed and said that yesterday she had too much to drink. This statement made the girl angry, and the guest said, "Didn't you pour me some water yesterday? You greased his face and his tail, and fanning his tail. I won't deny it, but I'd lost myself. I'm a man, and I'm not a stranger to humanity. If you were with me, I wouldn't need any woman. Now tell me what happened. Although I know what happened, I'm interested in something else. Why haven't you been in touch with me? How do you know what happened that day? Did you stop answering me? Your number was out of range. As soon as I arrived, I went straight to your place. But there were new tenants. I went to the neighbors who told me someone threw acid in your face. And then you and your mom, in a hurry, sold the apartment and moved out. It wasn't hard to find out who the perpetrator was. I went straight to my wife, and she confessed. She thought I was going to live with her after that, but I filed for divorce. That's my whole story. And now it's your turn. Do you remember my question? What's your answer? I didn't want to live then. You should have seen me at that moment. People looked away from me in horror. You can't imagine how hard it was to bear. And then my mom decided she was going to do whatever it took to make sure I could move on. So she sold the apartment. And with the money, I had several plastic surgeries. You joined my firm on purpose. No, I didn't even know you owned the firm. I just came to earn money here because the salary is higher than in our provincial town. When I saw you, I was stunned. I was really shocked at that moment. And when you started calling me again, I hated you. I mean, your wife said you were a womanizer. And now it's kind of true. Christina always had a way of slandering me. I only cheated on her twice during my marriage. One time was when I was drunk. And the second time, you already know that you and I were intimate. I told you before that I've been without a woman's affection for a long time. Now tell me, what should we do with you? I've been thinking about you all this time. I could have started a family many times, but I didn't. Somewhere subconsciously, I was waiting to meet you. Cindy listened to Sebastian in silence. She could see that at this moment, the man was speaking sincerely. The young woman sat down on the couch and took Sebastian's head with her hands, held it out to her, and then kissed him on the lips. The girl didn't care about anything right now. She wanted to be in the arms of this man. And in a few minutes, the couple lay in each other's arms. They enjoyed the passion that possessed them, and only after a while were able to tear themselves away from each other. Young people lay and breathed heavily. And then Sebastian embraced the woman, and looking into her eyes, asked, "Will you marry me?" "I guess I don't know." Laughing, the girl said, "Oh, that's how you are." I'm seriously proposing marriage to her, and she's laughing. "Now I will bite you everywhere with deliberate seriousness," said the man, and began to shower his beloved with tender kisses. Afterwards, the couple had a long talk with each other. Cindy learned that Sebastian, after the divorce, took a loan and organized a travel agency where he is very rarely, since there is still his main job. He said that he had taken a job teaching French at a university. The young people would still talk for a long time, but then Cindy's phone rang. The girl answered it as she heard the voice of Sebastian's deputy, who sternly pronounced that she was late for work. The landlord, hearing this, laughed and picked up Cindy's phone, and then informed her that the employee was out on vacation and it was being decided whether she would want to work at all. After this call, the man turned to his lover and said that they were going to visit Cindy's mother the other day, as soon as he had settled his affairs, and then buy tickets and go all together to the sea. The girl looked at the chosen one and thought that perhaps fate had given them a second chance to be together forever. And after that, Cindy called her mom, and as soon as she heard her voice, she mumbled, "You said some time ago that you should be warned in advance. If I'm going with my lover, that's what I'm doing now. We're coming with Sebastian this week. He sends his love to you. So, Mammy, take a vacation, and we'll all go to the sea together. By the way, your future son-in-law said he doesn't accept any objections. I think this news made you happy. You don't even know how much. I love you, my family." With tears in her eyes from happiness, said the woman. Subscribe and click the bell.
She's so uncomplicated. Ethan smiled. and his smile was surprisingly gentle and dreamy. Who? John wondered. They were in a nightclub, but the loud music didn't stop them from talking. Separate rooms with excellent noise insulation were provided for solvent clients. The guys were not just solvent clients, but also regular and very generous with tips. Therefore, this small but very cozy office with panoramic windows and a mirror ceiling was, you could say, assigned to them. So who's the uncomplicated one? Ethan snapped out of his dreamy reverie and for some reason whispered, Slaga, she is such a... Listen, I honestly haven't met anyone like her. Her father owns a tire shop, a businessman, a hard worker, and the girl is not spoiled by life at all. I asked her where she likes to vacation. So she told me, you know what she said? You won't believe it. She says that at the cottage father says fishing, and they then from this fish caught, food cooked, fry it, and with boiled potatoes eat and soup still. Liar. John stared at me. You're a fool. She's playing a joke on you, and you believe it. What kind of girl would have fun like that, as if she's already retired? That's ridiculous. No, wait, I see what's going on. Where's their summer house? Did you ask? Maybe in Cyprus, maybe. No. It's just a little tree, 40 miles out of town, inherited from my grandparents. And that's where he and his daddy have their place of power. They go fishing, pick mushrooms, berries. Listen, she can make jam, and she dries mushrooms and pickles them. What a great girl! She says she starts her mornings with exercise and douses herself with cold water to avoid getting sick. No, but have you ever seen such girls? Not in the movies, but for real. Everybody else has a fitness center and a personal trainer and a healthy diet, and she's exercising in cold water. Aha! And fried fish and chips, plus jam. You're looking for exotic, aren't you? John asked me glumly. I don't even want to ask where you found it, but I'll advise you as a friend. Get rid of her before it's too late. You don't know these country girls, and they're clutching, she'll grab you and that's it. You won't realize how married you'll be, and then you won't get divorced. She'll grab everything she can reach, and you'll be left without pants. Oh, come on, don't make me sad. Ethan grinned. You haven't seen her, Clara. She's like a Cinderella, friendly, kind, and good at everything. Her eyes are like this, and all the time she seems to be surprised. I'll order her a coffee and a cake, and she'll have a happy look on her face. At the Moody's, take her hand in the dark, and she is already shining all over. And when I kissed her for the first time, I think she then even the whole night could not sleep. Knave, she's so cute and sweet, you could fall in love with her. Did you fall in love? No. Ethan wrinkled his nose and looked like a hedgehog about to sneeze, but then changed his mind. What kind of love? I've been with so many girls, I don't think I'm capable of falling in love anymore. You remember Thumbelina, don't you? I got bored beforehand. That's 100% me. And the girl? What about the girl? Well, beautiful but funny, but you'll meet another, even prettier, even funnier. If you fall in love with every girl, you won't have enough days in your life. John suddenly winked conspiratorially at his buddy. Listen, doesn't she have a girlfriend? Because you tell me so deliciously, I even thought I might be missing something in life. Jam, for example. You look for it. Ethan said arrogantly and burst out laughing. Come on, don't be so slow. Go to any cheaper club. There are 100 of them per square meter. And all hungry, you'll treat them to a cocktail and take them to your place. John remained silent, and Ethan suddenly felt sickened by his own cynicism. Ethan had been living in a sticky jam for a month now. It had started out so nice, so funny. Clara, In her colored sundresses, with her long hair and perpetually surprised look, her willingness to admire everything he said, to rejoice at any, even the cheapest gift. Ethan sometimes bought the girl the cheapest chocolates on purpose, just to test her reaction, but she was as happy about them as if she'd been given diamonds. She was so sweetly embarrassed and always asked him to turn off the lights. Every day she wished him a good morning. Yes, everything was so light, funny, plush, like a video clip of a couple in love releasing into the sky, balloons, hearts, and then, holding hands, going to an ice cream parlor. And then it happened, and I had to thrash around, twist and turn, come up with original moves, lie, lie, lie. Lying was the most painful of all. Ethan was more and more confused, with no idea how to get out of the horror that had come over him and pinned him to the ground. The horror looked exactly like the two purple stripes, parallel to each other, on a pregnancy test. It was the test that the idiotic Clara had presented to him by calling and scheduling an urgent appointment. "Come right now, please," she asked. "I have such news. In short, come." "What's wrong?" he asked, surprised. "Have the aliens taken over the planet?" "Ethan, this is not a phone call." "Come quickly. It's very important. I'm waiting for you." The girl didn't bother to explain. Ethan was very worried then. The demand, the urgency. It was something out of Clara's repertoire if she said it was urgent. Intuition, of course, was not dormant. Ethan suddenly remembered how, a couple weeks ago, he and Clara had decided to go out of town to a wild beach and had had a wonderful time there until late in the evening. They didn't even want to leave, and she fell in love with the place and kept repeating, "I will live here. I like it here so much that I want to stay here forever." Ethan understood her, he wanted to, but he wanted it to be like this. Warm but not hot weather, the water glistening, and for Clara to walk around in her bathing suit, and for them to be as old as they are today, 18 and 19. He would build a shawl then, right here on top of the hill, and in the evenings they would burn fires and drink cheap sweet wine. A picture to remember. He said out loud, "What is it?" "I want to say that I will remember this day and keep it in detail, like a photograph of you and me living here all our lives and not growing old for a minute. It's like a snapshot, only not with a camera, just with your eyes." He kept in his memory this picture of eternal summer and eternal happiness. However, there were no pharmacies nearby, but Ethan somehow hoped that it would be lucky. And if he hoped in vain, oh, not for good. All this urgency. Oh, not good. What if the wild beach left them a mark in the form off? What the hell is this? Maybe Clara just saw a cockroach and now he's afraid to move, or a mouse. He didn't notice how he accelerated his steps towards the girl's house. Whatever happened there, it was better to find out as soon as possible and not to be tormented by doubts. And maybe it would turn out that there was nothing to worry about. Maybe the girl just needs some help. You know, like move a couch. A couch would be nice. He ran up the stairs to find out, finally, what was the cause of Clara's anxiety. Here's already her floor. Ethan didn't even have time to ring the doorbell. But Slaga jumped out into the entryway in a bathrobe, clutching in her fist a strip of paper with 2 dashes on it. Ethan tried hard not to think about where the test had been before it was picked up. "Look, look!" The girl shrieked, smiling so contentedly that Ethan immediately wanted to run away. Of course, Clara, with her usual stupidity, didn't notice anything and kept shoving the object of her idiotic pride under his nose. Well, what to do now? I wonder what kind of reaction she expects. That he, too, would jump with delight, pick her up in his arms and start twirling her around? Or fall to his knees and start kissing her still flat belly like in the movies? Yeah, a bad movie. Ethan, what's wrong with you? Is that your face? You're not happy. She finally figured it out. I should be happy. But are you happy? It's our baby, yours and mine. Isn't it great? Yours is. Ethan blurted out the first thing that came to his mind. But as for me, that's a moot point. He knew he was saying a nasty, insulting thing. He knew that Clara didn't deserve them, but he was saying them, and now, at this very moment, he wanted them to be true. How do I know? Maybe I wasn't your only one. You didn't swear fidelity to me, did you? Maybe you were seeing someone else at the same time. I wouldn't be surprised at all. How? How? Why? Because. Do you have proof that you didn't go out with someone else, that you only went out with me? No? Well, I don't have any proof either. So why should I believe you? The girl's huge eyes instantly filled with tears. Ethan, look, there's 2 stripes, that means. I know what it means without you telling me. It's okay, it happens. But what does that have to do with me? Who else? Ethan, what's wrong with you? I'm not with anyone else. Here's a test, check it out. Don't give me that test. I've seen it. I'm not interested in what it says, Ethan. He asked, squeamishly pulling away. Well, where? Show me. Clara slammed her eyes shut resentfully. A crystal tear ran down her rounded cheek, her eyes large, open, amber-colored. At first, they seemed childishly enthusiastic and naive. Where had it all gone? It was as if the enchantment had dissipated in an instant, leaving only the surprise of his own blindness. Where was he looking before? Naivety, delight. Now he realized it was not enthusiasm, but elementary stupidity. Too bad it was too late for him. I had no one else. The girl whispered in a trembling voice. You know you haven't. How would I know that? Ethan started up. Do you think I've been following you? I mean, who else could have been involved? I'm just saying. You go to the doctor for an abortion. If there's anything there, you have to pay. Fine, I'll pay. But then we break up because I don't want to do it again. Especially from a girl I've never been sure of. You'll get pregnant again, and then you'll want to pin it on me. No way. To the doctor, there was a voice from behind the door. She's going to register, to observe the pregnancy. Who the hell is that? The boy was confused. The door of the apartment opened, and Ethan saw a man in old sweatpants on the doorstep. Apparently, this character was the future grandfather of the 2 stripes and the daddy of the dopey, blissful one. In addition to the pants, the man was dressed in a shedding t-shirt, which favorably emphasized his emerging potbelly. His vast baldness was a strange contrast to his thick, dark mustache. His gaze was ferocious, a real monster. Good evening, young man. The monster said hello politely and without any transition, grabbed Ethan by the shirt on his chest and pulled him closer. It's going to kill him. The boy thought and squeezed his eyes shut just in case. Definitely will. My name is Christopher. The monster growled, breathing in the guy's face. His breath smelled of fish and something else alcoholic. Beer, probably. Ethan, the boy wheezed. The shirt on his chest pulled taut and rattled threateningly. Nice to meet you, continued the monster who called himself Christopher, continuing the conversation. As you may have already guessed, I am Clara's father. Before you say anything in your defense, I feel it is my duty to inform you that I will not tolerate rudeness. This almost refined politeness, combined with the creepy paw rubbing his shirt and the horrifying face in close proximity to Ethan's face, had a paralyzing effect. The guy didn't dare open his eyes, and he didn't even think about trying to break free. "If you hurt her, you hurt me, and it's dangerous to hurt me," growled the monster. "And now a second warning. You will marry my daughter, because my grandson must be born in a legal marriage. Maybe you have not yet had time to propose marriage, Clara, as befits a decent man. Well, now is the time to do it now. That's what you were going to do, like a real man, not a trashy little bastard, right? Am I right? Am I right?" With each new phrase, the monster shook the guy vigorously. "You're right. Yes, yes, of course. That's a smart boy." Christopher, unclasping at last his mighty hand, carefully smoothed Ethan's shirt and patting him paternally on the cheek. "Because if you had been a shameless scoundrel, capable of abandoning a pregnant woman, I would have made a cutlet of you and fed you to my dog. And now I dare not disturb you anymore." The monster smiled and disappeared behind the door. Ethan slid along the wall and sat down on the floor. "Is your father crazy?" he asked. "Or does he always act like that? Or only with guests?" The girl glanced at the door and pressed her finger to her lips. "Speak quietly." "Daddy's hearing is phenomenal. He can hear everything through 3 doors. You'd better be quiet. We're getting married then." Ethan mumbled and covered his face with his hands. It's a nightmare. It was impossible to believe what was happening. The next day, Christopher personally drove the couple to the marriage ceremony and made sure that the applications were written in the proper form and accepted as they should be. At the same time, he kept glancing at Ethan as if he expected the groom to run away or act crazy. "Clara said you're not a poor guy. He said it after the applications were filed. Of course, it's good to have something to live on while my wife is at home with the baby. Well, how are you doing? What do you do for a living?" "Where? Nothing," mumbled the guy. "Work is bad now. They pay me a trifle everywhere." Christopher nodded. "That's true. But no one ever got rich on a paycheck like that. You should try to organize something yourself." "All right, it's solvable. But what do you live on?" "My parents give me a little. They've got." "Well, I see. I see. Don't go on." The future father-in-law waved away. "Well, Clara?" He looked at his daughter. "Congratulations. You found yourself a lazy man with an ego and a slacker. And this daughter," Christopher unceremoniously pointed his finger at Ethan. "This one, look closely, is your future husband. What do you think of that?" Well, the girl lowered her eyes. "Things are different now, aren't they?" "Right, Ethan. He's a family man now. I think he'll be able to work and provide for me and the baby." "You think so?" Dad grinned. "Well, think. It's my business, but if you want to know what I think, I'll tell you this. This Major doesn't like to work and doesn't know how to work. If he could do something, he wouldn't be on his parents' back. And if he didn't know how to do something, but he loved it, he'd be trying to learn something. But that was before, Daddy, and now. He doesn't love you either." Christopher went on. "And his father is, I apologize, like a pig, a snow-white swan." "Come on, Dad. Shut up. You asked for my opinion, so stay out of my way. And here's my advice to you, my daughter. Send him away. Right after the baby's born, he's no use to you and won't be. This way you'll have a child in marriage, and you'll get rid of the stone around your neck. Girl, you're beautiful, you're smart. You'll find yourself a nice guy with a head and a heart. And this one," he glanced contemptuously at Ethan, "he'll never be a man again. He's all right on the face, handsome, but there's nothing good about him except his face. The face changes with time." Ethan gritted his teeth. He's in trouble. Now this car mechanic with 3 grades of education is going to sit there and insult him. Dad, don't, asked Clara, pointing her eyes at the groom. It's unpleasant for him. And in general, of course, you have a lot of life experience, but maybe you're wrong. But it's unlikely. Can I, said Ethan, who up to this moment had been gloomily silent, stop insulting me? I'm your daughter's fiancé and the father of your grandson. Who gave you the right to behave like this? Aya, nobody yet. If you want to prove your worth, get a job. Think about a place to live. And by the way, start taking care of your fiancé. She's pregnant. She needs rest, proper nutrition, light emotions. The doctor said Clara needs fruit and vitamins. Go and think about it and get her that. For starters, the next day, Ethan was walking through the yard of his fiancé's house and could not answer himself the question, what was he doing here? A heavy bag of fruit and vitamins for Clara was weighing down his arm. Humanitarian aid for pregnant fools and very heavy. Christopher opened the door for him himself and held out his hand for the bag. Did you bring fruit? Good for you, come on. Clara is not at home now. I sent her to the cottage in the morning. Let her get some fresh air. She'll be back on Thursday. I'll tell her you came by. Ethan was not invited to come in, and he remained standing, staring dumbfoundedly at the cheap sodden door. Why am I here? Again he asked himself, but there was no definite answer to that question. Most likely because not to come to leave Clara, no matter how stupid she was, would be to agree with the characterization that this disgusting type, her father, had given him. And also because he was scared. This really Christopher, a man without a tower, such a man will unscrew his head and then surrender to the authorities, but only unscrewed, it is no longer screwed back in place. Screw it all and skip town right now. And then what? Daddy has long ago and quite unambiguously made it clear to his children that either after receiving a certificate of higher education, they stay to work at his company, or they cannot count on the inheritance and at least some financial support. This means that to run away is like agreeing to a miserable existence, to be lost on the streets, and to fend for themselves. Ethan shakes his head, as if he hoped to shake her out of her fears and any other unnecessary thoughts. I had to think of some way out of this, and as soon as possible. But, as it turned out, no reasonable ideas appeared, and it was clear that he could not do without his sister's advice. Clara stood at the window, watching Ethan nervously pacing the sidewalk in front of the house, probably thinking about something, and certainly nervous. He sent you some fruit. My father shouted from the room. I left it on the table in the kitchen. And why did you deceive him that I'm at the cottage? Asked the girl. I heard. Christopher stood on the threshold of the room, leaned his shoulder against the jamb, and looked intently, very seriously at his daughter. I wanted to buy you some time, he said, for you to think calmly whether you want him or not. You see what he's like. He's neither fish nor flesh. A slug. Then why did you ask him to marry you? I pressured him, of course. I couldn't listen to him go on and on about you. But tell me something. Do you really want to marry him, that lazy bum? A child without a husband isn't very nice, but if you look at it another way, maybe it's better to have no husband than that dry fruit of yours. I love him, I confessed. You love him, of course. It's understandable. While you were dating, hugging, kissing, all was well with you. But it's the same for everyone until there are no responsibilities, no children. He's a handsome guy, looking in love, holding your hand, talking nicely. Love, carrots, all those beautiful things. And how did things get complicated? So where did it go, his love? I heard everything. He didn't tell you, Clara. Even though we didn't plan it, we'll get through it and I'll be with you, no matter what you decide, did he? He didn't, did he? No. He started talking about how the baby might not be his and other nasty stuff that made me want to throw up. And I'm not squeamish. I was. So let me ask you a different question. Will you have something to love him for when the passion passes? And it will pass. Can you believe me? There will remain the character of a man, his deeds, for what you can respect. You can despise, you can love, and you can hate. Will there be something to love him for then? Clara lowered her head and bit her lip. Daddy, she said after a short silence. I don't know now. Ethan was the prince from the TV series. Tall, slender, dark-eyed in his movements, the lightness of a predator and the fluidity of water flowing from one position to another as naturally, easily, beautifully as if a river were flowing. And his speech was like a river, as smooth, unhurried, and sometimes like a noisy stream. Clara thought he must smell of water. Fresh, clean, fresh from the spring, but it was the opposite. When she hugged Ethan, she could always smell the woods, resin and herbs and something else, but it was so intoxicating that it seemed impossible to break the embrace. To stand like this, pressed together, and breathe in the smell of my beloved. Inhale it and do not stop, do not get distracted. You're a river, and it smells like a real forest. She used to say, why a river? I don't know. They say I'm a river, but I'm not. But you didn't. You're like a river. You've come into my life and filled it all with you. So you're a river? No, I'm just yours. How many of these conversations have they had? How many unbreakable embraces? How can you forget that now? And now Ethan was nothing like his recent self. Where did he get all this insolence, meanness, anger? The way he kept saying he didn't know if she'd been faithful to him or if she'd gone out with others, as if she could look at others. She didn't notice anyone but him. Clara still loved him, but realized more and more clearly she loved her memories of Ethan and the real him she didn't know at all. She doesn't want to know. I don't want to be a daddy. I don't want to be a daddy. Ethan kept repeating himself. With each word, he banged his head against the soft back of the chair. Nancy was quietly looking at her fresh manicure and didn't seem to notice what was happening. She was silently worrying about when her brother would finally calm down enough to talk to her. Ethan groaned for a few more minutes, then lifted his head. Why don't you say something? He asked in a perfectly normal voice. Don't you see your brother's life is a disaster? You could have said something, consoled him, given him some advice. Nancy shrugged her shoulders. Ethan, you're a fool. Aphoristically, she said. It's pretty clear, he said. What do we do now? That gastropub has a crazy daddy. He'll kill me, and he won't regret it. You. Is that how you talk about the girl you love? I never loved her. Ethan moaned. She's cute, she's pretty, and I got carried away for a while. But what kind of love? You have to pay for pleasure. Nancy said admonishingly. As for everything else, however, for stupidity, for ignorance, for beauty and talent. But pleasure usually costs more than anything else. Thank you for the informative lecture. The brother bowed. But what should I do, huh? So I don't have to go back to it. The sister began slowly, looking up at the ceiling. I warned you that your games in bad neighborhoods to the suburbs and affairs in bedroom communities will not lead to good. But since you didn't listen to me, and you, she pointed her finger at her brother. You didn't. Now we need to find out what options we have to solve the problem. The first option is to offer the girl money for an abortion and make sure she gets proper care and maintenance. Dad, tell her that horror, spontaneous miscarriage, but you will cope. You can overcome this grief together, supporting each other. You don't know that fool, Clara. Ethan said glumly. There's no way she's going to go along with this. People like her have only one goal in this life, to have a bunch of children like a pig and sit among them contentedly while a man works for her and all this litter. So this option is out. Nancy stated nonchalantly. Let's move on to the second option. It's simpler, but also more complicated. Say it. Leave everything as it is and raise the child together. Wow. One option is better than the other. Do you have any other interesting ideas? A third option. I haven't thought of a third one yet. Maybe I should just drop off the radar, sorely suggested the guy. Why? It's quite possible. Just change your phone number, leave, and that's it. There'd be no place for us to cross paths with her then. He grinned. We'll be on different paths. And her dad's a crazy tire man. He won't be able to find me. Nancy shook her head. No, my dear brother, that won't do. I won't say the platitudes about the fact that if you do, you'll lose your father's financial support in no time. That's half the trouble, if you ask me. Money can be earned. The trouble is, you're incapable of taking care of yourself. And do you know why? And why is that? Asked my brother. Because the created problems need to be solved, and you just want to merge quietly, disappear. Yes, almost all men do that. Ethan was indignant. You'd think. And that's why they almost all lie as they have to. The girl said, they work for miserable wages, live in shanty towns, and in the evenings drink the cheap liquor they're sold under the guise of beer. That's pretty much all of yours. You want to be like that. What's that got to do with it? It's got everything to do with it. Nancy sighed. That it's not those who run away from problems who live well, but those who aren't afraid to face them. Those who solve them. You have a problem, and you want to run away from it. In that case, how long after you get your inheritance will you be on the street? If, of course, you get it at all, and not crawl back under your parents' wing after you've been fired for stupidity from your supermarket cashier position? Inheritance. Ethan grumbled. What's there to talk about now? Dad's health is good. That's fine. It seems to be as far away from the inheritance as the moon. But it'll come sooner or later. And frankly, I wouldn't want you to give up your share and then settle down to support me, said the sister. There was so much cold certainty in her tone that Ethan felt uneasy. Nancy was, unlike her brother, the pride of the family, a strategist's mindset, independence, the ability to make quick decisions and put them into action, and a persistence so persistent that God forbid she should dream of it. A robot, not a woman. Ethan joked, but deep down he admired his sister. That's why he ran to her for advice whenever he had the slightest difficulty. Usually she managed, thinking quickly, assessing the situation correctly, and giving excellent advice. But today, it seemed that even Nancy could not give him any advice, but she spurred his own imagination. You're a good girl, sister, he said and clapped his hands together. I think I've figured out what to do. The beer was disgustingly diluted. Ethan forced himself to swallow what was already in his mouth, but he set the mug aside. The bulky man sitting across from him was also his future father-in-law. He looked at the guy with bewilderment. Do not like it, he asked. You'll have to excuse me, Christopher, replied Ethan. You know, I'm not very good with beer. But I couldn't explain to this fat and aging man that beer was at least something you could try at Oktoberfest before it became too popular. Well, or at least in the Czech Republic. And what you can buy for pennies at the supermarket is not beer. It's rat poison. Suit yourself. He smiled. but I like to drink beer in the evening at work. You know, you get tired, so here it is." He lifted the bottle. "Relaxes me, relieves stress, and puts me in a positive frame of mind." Ethan nodded politely. "That's what my father says." Christopher immediately seized on the mention. "He's a good man, your father, a hard worker. By the way, it's about time we got to know each other. What do you think? Because look, you and Clara are about to get married. You'll soon become parents, and we haven't even seen the matchmakers yet." "It's not right." "Yes?" Ethan mumbled uncertainly. "But, you know, we have such a family, such a... Well, family is family." The man interrupted him. "Whatever they are, they're our own. You just bring them to us, and we'll make friends." Ethan was silent. "You're in trouble, you idiot. You're in trouble." He should have listened to his sister, because she'd always told him to socialize with people in his own circle. And she was right on the money, you bastard. Well, what? The son of an entrepreneur, for a minute a man with 2 higher education, who for fun is studying a 5th foreign language, may have in common with the daughter of the owner some lousy tire shop. He's just a common bastard anyway, and his daughter is the same, even if she is beautiful. Fool! Ethan berated himself for the umpteenth time this evening. If you want a taste of tart exoticism, you can have it. You know he lied, following a momentary burst of inspiration. "I don't want you to meet my parents because I'm embarrassed, because they're, well, how should I put it, unusual people." "Do they drink?" Christopher raised his eyebrows. "So, yeah, sure, it's a scary thing. But you can talk to them. If they want to quit, so I will organize treatment. I have a brother in New York just from addiction. He's a great doctor. He's got a whole clinic. Sure, yeah, I'll have to talk to them about it. Maybe they'll agree. That would be very good. It'll be fine, Ethan, as long as they want to live sober." The boy's got his head down. "I'd like to postpone your acquaintance after all, especially since Clara's pregnant. Why should she go to all this trouble? She doesn't. But will they even come to the wedding?" "I guess they said they'd try, but they didn't make any firm promises. So we'll meet them in a week." Christopher shouted contentedly and took another big sip of his disgusting beer. The wedding was bearing down on Ethan at the speed of sound, but now he was looking forward to it. Each new day brought the lad closer to the coveted day, the release. The plan he had devised was simple and brilliantly thought out. They, that is, both Clara and her crazy father should be disappointed in me. He informed his sister. They should realize that it's better to be a single mother than to be married to a jerk like me. With tireless energy, he invented new ways to convince the bride, especially the future father-in-law, of his repulsive nature. "When do you think you'll get a job?" Christopher snapped at him. "Your bride is not an elephant. 2 years pregnant will not walk. But I'm looking for something." Ethan turned around. "I haven't found anything yet." "All right, you'll come to my tire shop. I'll teach you everything myself. I'll pay you well. If you work well, you'll start earning well." This conversation was repeated with depressing regularity, and in the end, Ethan saw a suitable occasion to demonstrate once again his unsuitability for family life. The only thing left to do was to summon up the courage. "I don't want to work." Bluntly, he declared one day to Clara and Christopher. "Why should I? My parents still give me money, and as soon as the child is born, I will also get an allowance from the state." How much did Clara find out? But no matter how much it is, it's still money. "And when the baby grows up?" asked the girl anxiously, looking at the groom. "The allowance will end, and the older the child, the more money is needed for him. The allowance will run out, but Clara, the parents won't," Ethan assured her. And when it ends and but so then there will be an inheritance, and not a small one. By the way, I've already decided what we'll spend it on. We'll buy a big house and rent it out. It's for passive income. You do nothing and the money drips. It's beautiful. And you and I will go to Thailand. Life is very cheap there. We'll have enough rent money for 2 people. Why 2? What about the baby? Or don't you plan to take him with you? Oh, Clara, Ethan said reproachfully. You can't just think of yourself. Where do you want to take the baby? To Thailand? No, you can't even ask me that. Of course, you shouldn't take the child with you because of the climate change, insects, kindergarten, school, medicine. In short, we'll leave him here. Let Grandma and Grandpa take care of him, and we'll go there to rest. We can come and visit once in a while. But wait, Ethan. Why? Christopher stepped in. I think it's a great plan. We can implement it. At least I'll make a man out of my grandson. Daddy will not teach him anything good. Right, Clara? You're starting again. Offended, Ethan said, and was silent for a long time. That's how you try to offend me, to humiliate me. And for what? Because I want to arrange everything so that Clara and the child would be happy. It's better to separate mother and child. Ethan was silent, but in his heart he felt that he had just won a small but important victory. Let them continue to think that he was a foolish, worthless, twitchy idiot from whom nothing could be expected. The next day he showed up at his fiancée's house drunk and diligently made noise in the entryway, until Christopher peeked out of the apartment and threatened to call the police. Oh, come on, Dad. Ethan swung the bottle in a cartoonish fashion. Some of the wine spilled over his head and ran down his face. Ethan wiped away the alcohol and licked his palms. Christopher looked at him in disgust, which was exactly what the groom's script called for. Oh, he said, smiling stupidly. Can I call you Dad? Dad? Dad is just right. It's you. Go home, Christopher advised him. Go before I turn you into the police. So how do you go home? Ethan was indignant. I'm here to see my sweetheart. Yes, Clara, yes, my little darling. Come here, come here. He pinched his bride's cheek. I can't do anything without my Clara. I can't do anything without her, Daddy. I can't eat, I can't sleep, and I can't see you, said Christopher. Get out, and don't you dare breathe your booze on my daughter. You'll come back when you're sober. Having waited a few more days after the drinking performance, Ethan again came to the guests and demanded a wedding present from his future father-in-law. So you don't have to worry about what to guess. You know how they give us all kinds of awful junk, and then people agonize, they don't know where to put these gifts. So let's make a wish list, like some people do. Do what? Well, wish list means wish list. The guests will familiarize themselves with it, and then everyone will decide what to give from this list, and there are only the necessary things. I think you'll give us an apartment, he said, but I'm telling you right away, we need a 2-room apartment, a child. And what will your parents give? Christopher grinned. Maybe a summer house? You put it on your wish list. The child will need fresh air and vitamins. By the way, I've already looked at a nice cottage near the city. All communications are already pulled up, sewerage, water, electricity. There is near a pine forest, very clean air, and there is a garden, so we won't have to grow apples ourselves. Daddy? Clara laughed, but Ethan stopped her with a gesture. My parents will support us, he said habitually, adding a note of resentment to his voice. Isn't that enough for you? Christopher sighed and shook his head. Unfortunately, yes. If they had raised you to be a man, I'd be much more grateful, honestly. Clara, he turned to his daughter. Why do you need such a husband? Maybe you'll change your mind while there's still time. Daddy, the girl was confused. You wanted to have a child in marriage, didn't you? I did. Dad didn't disagree. But look at him, that father. Then such a father, maybe it's better. Clara, Ethan raised his head in offense. Do you see what's going on here? Your father wants to separate us. Are you just going to keep quiet? Let the child grow up without a father? Because you see, Christopher, you don't like me, do you? Clara smiled and waved her hands. Honestly, Ethan, it seems to me that you yourself want us to break up. I just don't understand why you won't say it openly. Because your crazy dad would cut me to ribbons. Ethan thought, but he only said one thing out loud. Don't be silly, the wedding's in a week. His sister was skeptical of Ethan's plan. It was her nature to be skeptical, she said, and she was probably right. But Ethan still believed in his own strength. Just a little more to go, just another week. They're already at their limit, barely hanging on. Just a little more patience, and the wedding day's in a week. My sister reminded me. Exactly. Ethan exclaimed happily. Exactly. That's just about the day of the wedding. And that's when I'm going to have my main gig, after which, oh, Nancy, I'm going to have such a party to celebrate my release. We'll go to the Canaries. We'll get some people together, rent a beach and party from morning till night till the ambulances come for us. Sister only gave me a sharp shoulder. Let's see if your idea doesn't fail, she snorted. Don't say gop until you've jumped over it. I've already jumped over, my dear sister. I have. Ethan laughed and hugged Nancy tightly. Clara was pensively going through the countless ruffles on her wedding dress, the dress itself hanging on its hinges on the closet door. Christopher looked into his daughter's room and sat down beside her. It's beautiful, he said, looking at the wedding dress. The ribbons, the lace. I never understood these wedding dresses. After all, for one day it is, and the wedding is off and in the closet. But beautiful. Yes, beautiful. Clara let go of the caressing fabric from her fingers and turned to her father. This is not what I dreamed of, Dad. Not at all. And now I'm looking at this dress and thinking, who am I going to wear it for? Ethan? The man felt that now the girl was ready to tell him something important, special, and kept silent, afraid to scare her mood. You know, when I met Ethan, she said slowly, I felt like I'd met some kind of fairy prince, and not just because he was handsome. He took such good care of me, drove me to school, picked me up after class, fed me at restaurants. Then we went out, went to the movies. Every day? Dad asked. Every day. And it seemed to me that it was like going to the movies. And nothing about it made you suspicious. I did. It was only a couple of weeks later that I suddenly thought, doesn't he have any business of his own? I mean, we were together all the time. From morning till night. It's like he's got no school, no job, nothing. Nothing but fun. I asked him, and he looked at me so strangely and said, I can afford to rest. But here he is all resting and resting. Father snorted. And does not get bored. Yes, and when I found out I was pregnant, I thought that now everything would change for sure. Ethan will realize that now he can't go out like he used to, thinking only about pleasures. That a family, a child will be here soon, and that's a responsibility. You have to think about the future. But the further I go, the more I realize that he's not going to think about anything. You see the way he acts, it's like he's getting cocky on purpose. Christopher didn't know what to say. And what can you say? Clara saw and said it all herself. You can still replay everything, he said softly. Just tell that bum there's no wedding. It's my fault, too. When I found out about it, I was furious. I thought I'd do anything, and the child would be born in marriage, and then the grass would grow back. But you know how they treated it in my time. It was considered a disgrace. That's what I thought out of habit, and then I looked around and everything had changed. What's the point? Now many women give birth to children, but they're in no hurry to get married. What can you do if you're not lucky enough to have a father? We'll raise the kid, work, bring him up. You'll meet a good guy. And this one, what's he worth to you? He's a fool. If only I'd realized who he was before. Sadly, smiled Clara. And now I feel like I have to go all the way. And I keep thinking, well, at least he said that there will be no wedding, even if he refused to marry. Why wait for him to say that? My father was surprised. Can you do it yourself or not? But do you want to? I'll tell him, and I'll throw him down the stairs with my great pleasure, eh? The wedding is the day after tomorrow, Dad, reminded my daughter. Everything is ready, money spent, invitations, restaurant. How can I cancel it all? How then to look people in the eyes? Give it up. Christopher laughed. Who cares? Changed her mind and that's it. If you don't like it, the door's over there. No, you can't do that. Can you marry a jerk? I made a mistake. What can I do? So I'll have to go all the way, said the daughter. And the father realized that no matter how much he wanted to, he couldn't change her mind. She feels sorry for her. She doesn't want to marry that Ethan of hers. She's embarrassed in front of others, but in front of herself, in front of her child. Ethan was getting ready for the wedding. He'd been shopping all day, but he hadn't found anything suitable. What kind of discrimination is this? Why aren't there stores for people who like tattered clothes? What do fashion designers care about? Are they creating some kind of fashion collection? One uglier, one uglier. And where, you may ask, are the fashion collections for the homeless, where in the end, you can get at least a homeless man's masquerade costume? Shopping had worn him out. Ethan was about to fall into despair, but then a brilliant idea struck him. Why look for special clothes? You could just make your own. A pity, of course, but what not to sacrifice for a great cause? All it takes is a little dirt. That's it. Ethan flew home on wings. Once home, he got down to business with all the imagination he could muster. First, he wet the soles of his sneakers with water and carefully walked in them over his sweater and jeans, which he spread out on the floor. The prints were quite convincing, but they weren't the only thing he could do. He found some pistachio ice cream in the fridge and smeared it on his jeans and sweater. Then Ethan poured some instant coffee into a jar and poured it on his sweater. His jeans got a few ketchup stains and a couple of greasy butter stains. Only the finishing touches remained. Ethan, armed with a pair of scissors, carefully cut the sweater along the seam and ripped off the sleeve. Then he stretched the sweater in all directions to add bagginess and was satisfied with his creation. The elegant summer sweater was now unrecognizable. The jeans were a different story. Despite the ketchup, ice cream, and butter, the stupid pants still didn't look bad enough. Ethan stomped around in his sneakers just in case, cut off the back pocket, leaving it dangling on a couple of verses, and in addition, poured a glass of water on one pant leg and poured instant coffee right on the wet spot, then began laboriously rubbing the rich coffee powder right into the fabric. It would be more expressive that way. It really did fix things. Now the pants looked just right. They looked like they'd been pulled out of a dumpster. Ethan marveled aloud, taking another critical look at his clothes. His wedding outfit was ready. Clara sat in the kitchen, melancholy, stirring the sugar in her cup. The wedding dress hung in its former place. The girl had glanced at it without interest in the morning and passed it by. "You're not dressed yet," surprised Christopher. He saw that his daughter was sitting in her pajamas, her hair gathered in a shaggy bundle, and did not even try to look at the clock. He himself had already managed to wake up, eat breakfast, and take a shower. Now he only had to get dressed and could go to marry his daughter. But only the daughter was not in a hurry. Soon the groom will come, and you are unwashed, sitting in your pajamas. How can you do that? What's the matter with you, Clara? Don't you feel well? "I don't want to get married, Papa," she said, without any expression. "I don't. To Ethan, no, you shouldn't marry a man like that. I only realized last night you can't. It would be a tragedy. It'd be misery, and I've got a baby to think about. Dad, can we still call it off? Isn't it too late? But you found time to change your mind." The father smiled and patted the girl's hair. "Right on the day of the wedding. Well, better late than never. Your fool is coming, and you'll tell him. Or do you want me to tell him?" "No, Dad, don't. I'll tell him myself. I'll decide. I'll tell him myself." Clara finally looked up at her father with a tired look. "I haven't slept all night." He understood. "Look at the circles under your eyes. Oh, youth, youth? Don't worry, my child," he said quietly. "You've made the right decision." Ethan looked at himself in the mirror again with pleasure. Perfect. He had thought of everything, or almost everything. No, the watch had to come off. He smeared a little olive oil on his hair to make it stick together, then sprinkled it with flour. It was perfectly messy and even somewhat dusty, and the stubble on his face, which he hadn't gotten rid of in 2 days, had grown back sloppily. It remained to pay attention to his nails. The question of manicure was solved very simply. Ethan went outside and sat down on the nearest lawn, digging into the ground for a while. His sneakers, which he had also covered with earth, looked a little more civilized than necessary, and the guy got rid of the laces. Now everything was perfect. It was time to go after the bride. Just before Clara's house, Ethan stopped and took a few deep breaths and exhaled. And so the final act of the play Escape from Family Life began. An important key moment in his plan. Now it is necessary to play. Well, play brightly and even, probably brilliantly. Otherwise tonight he'll find himself a married man. The door was opened for him by Clara herself. "Ethan? What's the matter with you?" "Clara!" He howled and fell to his knees. "Clara, I'm so bad, I'm worse." "Clara, at least beat me. Will it make me feel better?" "Beat me, beat me." Ethan, calm down. "What's this masquerade? She's pregnant, she can't fight. Do you want me to beat you up?" suggested Christopher, who heard Ethan's cries. "Clara, get away. Let me get that slacker." "But Dad," the girl was angry. "You've got time for jokes. The man is so happy." "Without much sympathy," said Christopher. "Maybe he should call an ambulance?" "Clara," howled Ethan. "Clara, my darling girl, my favorite, how are we going to live with you now?" "Daddy's broke. They took everything from us for debts, every last cent. There's no money, no real estate. They took away all the shares. We have nothing left. How are we going to live now? How can I marry you now? My beauty, my Clara, my darling, my darling, my darling. Don't be silent. Tell me something, please." "Oh," the girl sighed. "Thank God, honestly." "What?" Ethan stopped howling in surprise and raised his head. "Clara, we can't get married now, can we?" "That's a good thing," she said sincerely. "I'm sorry, Ethan. It's probably my own fault for not saying it sooner. But you realize that. What kind of family are you?" You don't want it. Neither do I. What about your dad going broke? Of course he is, but maybe it's not that bad. I'm sure he's not that broke or anything. Don't you want to marry me? Ethan interrupted her. Well, yes, I don't. And it's a good thing we realized it before we got married. You don't want to marry me, he repeated, shocked. Clara sighed. I don't. I'm sorry. Ethan rose to his feet and looked at the girl resentfully. So I've been freaking out that now we can't get married. And you? Fuck you. Have a nice stay. Ethan rushed down the stairs and thought that this was it. He was running towards his long-awaited freedom, but for some reason he wasn't happy about it. Good girl, said Christopher. Well done, but don't take offense at him. It's just a slip of the tongue. Don't feel bad, baby. You did the right thing. And Ethan jumped out into the street, without slowing down, ran away from this house, away from Clara, away from her father, away from her child. From this whole nightmare story, for which he was ashamed and for some reason also very offended, as if he had just been betrayed by his most trusted friend. Only now, when everything was behind him, he wanted to ask himself what was so bad about marrying this sweet, loving girl? And would it have been so terrible to become a father? But it was both painful and pointless to think about it now. He had thought for too long that he was being trapped, lured like an animal into a trap, and he had been ready to do anything to break free. And now he wasn't needed, and it turned out that no one was trying to catch him. And the trap was not a trap. It's he himself made up a hell of a lot of things. But what about it now? What's the point? He ran along the asphalt path, and it seemed that this run could go on, if not forever, then for many, many millennia. Ethan never tired and never wanted to stop, ever. Maybe one day he would collapse from fatigue somewhere in Cambodia, but that would be later, when he was exhausted. Only then, and not before. But this time life decided everything for him. A persistent phone call made him stop. What? Ethan bellowed into the receiver. It was Nancy. Her sister, which was absolutely unbelievable, was sobbing at the top of her voice. What are you crying about? I can't understand a word you're saying. Ethan, come at once. Dad was in an accident. He wasn't saved. Can you hear me? Where is he now? Is he in the hospital? Is he in surgery right now? Do you need anything? How about blood? We're the same type. Ethan, Nancy screamed. Dad's dead. He's dead, you know. You're lying, whispered Ethan. You're lying, aren't you, Nancy? I don't believe you. I don't believe you. I don't believe you. He shouted so loudly that an elderly woman with a dog on a leash, passing by, flinched and stepped away. I don't believe you. Ethan shouted, I don't believe it. You're lying. Nancy, I don't believe you. But he did. Nancy wouldn't joke like that. He knew it. I'm on my way to the lineup. Set the sister through her tears. You come too. I can't on my own. Come, I'm waiting for you, Ethan. Will you come? I'll come. He whispered. I'll come right now. The rest of it went on like an endlessly sad movie, and everything Ethan remembered was somehow very vague. No matter how hard Ethan tried, he couldn't remember how he'd gotten a cab and gotten to Nancy. He only remembered calling his sister from the car and trying to find out where he was going and where she was waiting for him. And Nancy was sobbing, mixing up addresses, couldn't remember anything. Then she handed the phone to someone, and the address was found. Ethan found her almost unconscious, sedated. He had to identify his father's body. Ethan had heard that morgues could be cold, but for some reason he felt neither cold nor warm or anything. His father lay covered with a sheet, and when Ethan looked at his face, he saw almost no damage. That pleased him for some reason. Why? He couldn't remember that either. Maybe he just didn't want his father's face to be disfigured. The funeral, another moment of reverence, lingered in his memory. Ethan only remembered that his sister, despite her grief, had been able to pull herself together fairly quickly and had looked solemnly calm at the funeral, standing at his father's coffin. Ethan was not calm, and he was not calm either. He couldn't make himself feel anything, nothing at all, as if all his emotions had been numbed or taken away at once. He kept watching his father's coffin being lowered into the ground, and only one question kept him in suspense. Why? Why did his father need money? Why had he worked so hard to earn it? Why? Why did he hardly ever leave work? Why did he work like a slave in the galleys? What was it all for if it was all over in an instant? Only now Ethan realized that he had always thought that money could protect him from something. I guess it could, but all the money in the world couldn't stop a truck from going into the oncoming lane. Well, that's just how it is. Ethan couldn't get that thought out of his head. And then, sitting next to his sister at the reading of the will, it all became so unimportant. The money, the share in the business, the stock. What did it matter now? He thought about whether his father had time to look up at the sky. How often did he go out with friends? How many times have he sat on the ocean and watched the fiery, tropical sun sink in? Had he ever even seen the ocean? Or had he never had time to go on vacation? Somehow, that was all that began to matter. Nothing else. Hey, he looked up. Nancy, did you say something? I couldn't hear. You know, it doesn't matter though. Nancy. Ethan put his hand on his sister's shoulder. I want to give up my share of the inheritance in your favor. What? She was confused. What are you saying? Dad made a will for both of us, and you're saying you want to give up everything. Why? Of the two of us. He smiled. You're the one who's always smarter, more responsible. You're determined, strong. You won't let the cause to which our father devoted his whole life go to the wind. And that's why I want you to have it all. It's only fair and just. You should give it to someone who can hold it together and grow it. Not a schmuck like me. I'd really spend it all in a year and end up with nothing. That'd be okay, but I feel sorry for my dad. He put his whole life into this. There's just one thing I'd like to ask you. It's about Clara. I'm not gonna say anything in front of strangers right now. I'll text you, okay? Nancy covered her eyes for a second, then wiped away a tear with her handkerchief. What about you? She asked quietly. What are you going to do? Ethan? He shrugged. Me, I'll watch the sky, the sunsets. I'm leaving, sis. There's nothing more for me to do in this town. He squeezed the girl's shoulder lightly and walked out into the street. The whole world was waiting for him now. For a brief moment, Ethan wanted to go over to Clara's house to say goodbye to her, but he shouldn't have. He managed to realize something about himself. His father lived for work, and he, Ethan, could stay here and live for the child, but he shouldn't do that. There was nothing he could do. Everything in their family, the truest of naturals, fans. Dad and Nancy are work fans, and Ethan, he's a fan of freedom. And that's probably better than being a fan of parenting. It's bound to break the kid. No, better to watch the sunset. He went to the ticket counter and asked for a one-way ticket. Where to? They asked him. Anywhere. Wait for me, though. Anywhere to the ocean, and preferably south. Ethan stepped off the airplane straight into paradise. At least this place looked a lot like it. Tall palm trees waved in the wind, their huge leaves wreathed in opahalas. A wonderful fragrance of flowers wafted in the air. In the distance, but still close, the ocean offered its waters to the sun. The speech of the passers-by was more like the chirping of birds in the morning spring. "No luggage, sir?" Someone addressed him in passable English. "I don't need it." Ethan smiled. The joy, the fullness of life, made him want to sing. Never before in his life had he felt so free. He had a little money, enough to eat twice at any of the local cafes. And beyond that, he was too lazy to think about it. Tomorrow seemed so far away. There would be a day, there would be food. He went forward, not choosing the road. All paths here would sooner or later lead to the ocean. Nancy had no difficulty in finding Clara's address. She had arrived there in the morning to be sure to find her brother's ex-fiancé at home. She looked at her guest with a noticeably rounded belly, a little plump and surprised. "So it is you, Ethan's sister?" she asked at last. "How odd that you don't look like him at all." "Unfortunately, you're right, Clara." Nancy smiled. "Not in appearance, not in character, not in content. But that's not why I came here. I know my brother well, Clara, and I know that Ethan is, well, to put it mildly, not the most responsible person in the world. That's just the way he is, despite his many virtues. But I'm not a stranger to his child, and I'm his own aunt. And if you don't mind—" "Oh, so you want to see the baby?" She was delighted. "Well, of course, whenever you want. What are we talking about?" "I would like not only to see, but also to take care of my nephew." Nancy corrected the girl. "To take over, so to speak, fatherly duties." "Oh, come on, really. No, please listen to me, because it concerns the baby and his future. First of all, you, Clara, will receive a certain amount of money every month for the baby. Don't argue. Ethan, and you may not know this, has renounced his part of the inheritance in my favor. So I've decided that I'm going to dispose of it this way, with part of the money going to child support and the rest for your baby to inherit afterward. Well, in short, when his time comes to receive the inheritance, and until then I will try to see to it that the share of my nephew did not depreciate, but on the contrary, became more. I hope you won't object and argue with me. No. It is obvious to me, for example, that this is the right and just decision. You won't challenge it, will you?" "No, I know you wouldn't." "Nancy, I just wasn't ready. I understand everything you could tell me, that you're not in need, that your father will help you. But I still think it's justice. Don't deny me the chance to right my brother's wrong. I beg you very much. 8 months in the tropics will get to anyone." Ethan knew that now. Personal experience is nothing to be trifled with. Don't confuse tourism with emigration. Tourists fly in for a week's vacation, decide they're in paradise. Here, the sun is always shining and the ocean breaks its waves on the shore, and over the shore carried snow-white seagulls. For some reason, he realized now that it was time to go home. He had a sudden urge to see his sister, to see how she was doing, and to visit Clara. The baby must have been born by now, though Ethan had stopped counting the months long ago. He just lived, not caring about the numbers on the calendar or the days of the week. Sometimes hired for a paltry wage to load bananas for export. Sometimes for a bowl of food, he agreed to wash dishes in local eateries. Sometimes begging. Once even had an affair with a pretty mulatto. But alas, the passion quickly faded because they could not explain themselves to each other. Miracle Girl chattered in some unknown language and did not understand a word of English. But still their love passion allowed Ethan to live without hunger for several weeks. His beauty was a great cook, and there was always food in the house. That marvelous little girl worked in a cafe as a cook. There was a brief period in this strange life of his, full of coincidence, when Ethan got involved with a local gang, and for a while he robbed them and ran away from the police. Though, to be honest, he hadn't had to run away very often. The police here had an easy time turning a blind eye to a lot of things. If, of course, to offer the officers of the law a small cash reward, in general, it was very understandable. There were far more petty thugs than policemen in this banana paradise, and everyone wanted to live in peace. Strangely enough, Ethan liked it. At first, it even seemed that he would not part with his new friends and would eventually become the new Pablo Escobar. He was prophesied to have a great future. At first, it rounded his head and encouraged him. But then Ethan somehow got bored of it all at once. Who does not know, he may think that the life of any romantic from the big road can be anything dangerous, luxurious, frightening, saturated. But Ethan has personally experienced that even in such a profession, there is enough of its routine. One day he just left, quietly, without saying goodbye or throwing a party. His associates probably thought he'd been hit by a bullet in one of the endless street shootouts. It was a common occurrence. No one was looking for Ethan. And now he was standing on the shore, thinking that spring was probably in full swing back home, and for the first time in a long, endless time, he wanted to walk the familiar streets and hear his native speech. Yes, it was time to go back. He said to himself, "It's definitely time now." If he got a job loading bananas again, he could save up for a ticket in a month. Clara was cradling her tiny son and softly singing a lullaby to him. Christopher looked into his daughter's room and looked at two of the dearest and most beloved people in the world, Clara and baby No. Nothing is more precious than this. He thought, for the umpteenth time there isn't, and there won't be. Life, ongoing, endless from father to daughter, from daughter to grandchild. Clara caught her father's gaze and smiled. He had already fallen asleep. She said in a whisper. Christopher gently took the child in his arms and moved him to the crib. "Do not regret it?" he asked. "For what?" The daughter did not understand. He did not know what to answer. Probably about everything at once. About having a baby. About Ethan not working out. "Nonsense, Dad. Why should I regret it? I had such a wonderful son. And Ethan, what the hell with him? Besides, Father has noticed that you seem to have a new boyfriend." Well, you think I didn't notice the way that Doctor looked at you? I even came to see you off in person when you were discharged. You can't be fooled." Clara laughed. "He's kind of looking after me, and I like him a lot too. Although, of course, it's too early to talk about something serious." "What's the hurry?" "There's no hurry." Christopher agreed. No rumbled softly in the crib. Clara came over, but her father gestured for her to stop. "It's all right, I'll do it." He rocked the crib quietly and sang a lullaby to his grandson. Clara looked at her father and her heart warmed. The eternal circle of life from parents to children, from children to grandchildren. And nothing is more important than that nothing. Ethan. Nancy shouted when she saw her brother on the doorstep. He was terribly overgrown, dirty, and dressed in some strange rags. A veritable shambles. But it was her brother. She couldn't help but recognize him. "How I've missed you, little sister, how you've become." Nancy had clearly crossed the threshold between angular girl and young beautiful woman in a matter of months. She had put on a little weight, but it suited her remarkably well. Her cheeks, shoulders, and breasts had plumped up. Her movements had become fluid, and she had dyed her hair a couple of shades darker, just enough to accentuate her fair skin and emphasize her eyes. "How beautiful you've become," Ethan said sincerely. "And you?" "I've been going places no decent person should go. I'll tell you about it someday, or even write a book." Later, his sister interrupted him. "Tell me the most important thing. Did you come back for good? I mean back to a normal human life. You see, I need someone I can trust." "No, Nancy, I'm sorry." He even put his hands out in front of him, like he wanted to protect himself from his sister's words. "I can't. I wanted to see you. Just to be home. It's been a while, but you can't ask for more than that. I wish I could help you, but it's not my thing. Constancy, business, home, I'll only make things worse. I'll run away at the worst possible moment." "Then what?" "But maybe you could at least think about it." Nancy suggested it. "It's not like I'm suggesting you chain yourself to the office. We could find you something remotely, even something as simple as that, for starters. And then before you know it, you'll be up to your neck in business." He stopped his sister gently. "It's not for everyone. Sis, people like you like it, but it doesn't suit me at all. No offense to me, but suit yourself." Nancy lowered her head with a sigh. "I'm sorry, of course, but I suppose it's true. Everyone should do his own thing, what his soul is drawn to. You've grown up, sister." Ethan grinned. "So have you." She answered him in the same tone. "You haven't changed either." "Have you been to see Clara?" "She's married, but I'm still doing what you asked me to do. She gets good alimony, and when your son gets older." "Thank you, Nancy." Ethan meant what he said. He didn't come in. "You don't need to bring anything up. She's doing well, and I'm glad of it. She's a wonderful person, very kind and sincere. Everyone would be happy to have such a wife. But not you." My sister smiled sadly. "I am not suitable for Constancy. When it catches up with me, I get mad and start doing such a wild thing that I am ashamed of myself. Why should I ruin a good woman's life? Let alone my own child. Does she have a good husband?" "Yes, a very good husband. He's so protective of her and the baby. They're very happy, both Clara and Noah. I think in a couple of years they'll give Noah a brother or sister." "Well, that's good." Ethan smiled. "And now I'm going to go. It was good to see you by. Will you at least spend the night?" My brother smiled nonchalantly. "I'm not used to sleeping indoors unless the weather's really bad, and then I get nervous. But today it's warm." It felt good to be out on the city streets at night. Not that Ethan was looking for trouble, but somehow he was lucky. Or maybe it was just that it was peaceful at home compared to the tropical paradise. He'd never once run into a mugger, never had to deal with hooligans looking for someone to beat up. You could say the city at night was favorable to him. The streets were bright with streetlights, storefronts, and car headlights. He liked to sit on a bench and look at the road, cars passing by, everything like in life. Everyone goes his own way, and someone will get to the goal safely, and someone because of daredevillery will get into an accident, but will get off only a fright. And some, I didn't want to think about them. Ethan had become a surprisingly friendly man. I guess his life as a homeless man, his new life, had something to do with it. While he was rich, few people treated him kindly, only his colleagues in the racket, and those were gone as soon as he was a pauper. But now he was helped not to die by strangers, whom he knew had only enough. But kind grandmothers traders sometimes treated him with apples from their stalls. The cook at the street kiosk once took a long look at Ethan squatting on the curb with his alms bowl, then beckoned him over and gave him a huge, freshly cooked shawarma. And that man in the entryway, who wouldn't let the scandalized neighbors kick out in the rain a vagrant. These are such rays of kindness in a cruel world. You look at it, and you become kinder yourself. And even his seemingly bitchy sister. How happy she was to see his brother. How she persuaded him to stay and return to civilized life, to settle down. But she didn't succeed. Ethan had become too attached to freedom. And freedom he now understood as the complete absence of attachments to addresses, cities, people. Ethan would be howling with longing in a week if he were to go back to his old self. And no money was worth it, no money ever. Today he found a good spot right across the street from the restaurant. People come out of there nice because they're full, and if they're drunk, the catch could be great. True, they were often chased away from fish places, but if you don't worry and try to be inconspicuous, you might get lucky. Without any nostalgia, he looked at the huge, brightly lighted windows and polished steps at the entrance. Was it really only a year ago that he himself had been in places like this every day? Waiters in uniform with polite smiles now seemed to him creatures from another world, and not so long ago he considered them idlers, unworthy of any attention, servants. How are things changing? A few more coins fell into his coin bowl. Ethan raised his head. "Thank you, Ethan." The young woman who had just dropped the change into his piggy bank squatted down and looked straight into the tramp's face. Ethan instinctively pulled back, hiding deeper into his hood. His hair had grown long enough to cover his face, along with his beard. He wouldn't recognize him. He wouldn't even recognize himself now. He couldn't see his old self, no matter how hard he tried. But she did, didn't she? "Ethan? Is that you, Ethan?" Clara kept repeating his name, but he didn't want to respond to it. He hadn't been Ethan for a long time, at least not the Ethan she knew. "You're wrong, girl," he said hoarsely. "That's not my name." "I'm sorry." Clara straightened up and took out a few bills from her purse. "Here you go, please. And sorry again. I thought you reminded me of someone I know." "I'm sorry." He nodded without raising his head. "Clara," someone called out to her. Ethan squinted his eyes. A young man was standing beside a brand new car, opening the doors for his beloved. "I'm coming," she smiled. Her heels clicked on the pavement, the smell of perfume wafted away. She had gone far away, and there was no need to catch up with her. Ethan took some paper money from his piggy bank and hid it under his sweatshirt. "Thank you, Clara." Tonight he would have food and maybe even a little beer. What more could a free man dream of?